Hello, everybody. We are live back again here with another episode. And with me, as always, is Madan, Khayali. And again, this week, we are going to continue with our review of the debate that happened between Aaron Fasser, Mark Oppenheimer, Hamza Tzortzis, and Mohammed Hijab, right? So today what we're going to cover is we're going to cover the opening statement by Mohammed Hijab. Can you guys hear me? Kali, Mahaden, hello everybody.
Yes, we
Hello
can.
Mahaden, hello Kali. How are you guys doing?
Hi,
Yep.
Hello, hi, Mahat. Yes, I can hear you properly. And Mahathir as well.
All right. Before we deep dive into the subject matter, do you guys have anything to say? Before we start, I'll just say a few things, just as a customary things, before anybody raises any points, any fingers to us. I would say that we criticize ideologies, philosophies, and because of our backgrounds, it happens so that we criticize Islam. And our intention here is to deal the arguments in terms of philosophical arguments, basically, deal the ideologies with philosophical arguments. And our intention is nowhere at all to criticize any community, whether that happens to be Muslim community, or if we criticize at some point, Hinduism, that doesn't mean we are criticizing Hindus or Christians or, whatever you may have, right? And second thing, if anybody is watching it right away, I would request you to subscribe, like, and share so that more and more people can hear what's going through our heads and maybe point us at where we are going wrong. So straight away, we're going to deep dive into the topic. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen. And the screen, this time along, it's going to be the opening statement by... Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. So before we start, you guys stop me whenever you want me to, whenever you have a point to make, right? Kali, Maden.
Yeah, and just... Sorry,
No,
Mahathir, yes,
go on,
please.
Kylie, do you want to
Yeah,
go
I
first?
just wanted to ask the audience, if anyone is listening, to just confirm once we have started the video that the audio quality is fine and audible, right? Because I read a few comments and in fact I noticed that the audio quality for our last stream, which we did on Aaron Fasser's opening statement, wasn't that good. So we just want to make sure that the audio quality is good and at least understandable by the audience.
Right.
So
Yes,
just
that's right.
like some feedback from the audience.
Yeah.
All right.
And
So guys, let us know whether the audio quality is good or not for each one of us.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly make a few points. And also, of course, let me know if my audio quality is good as well. Just a few points is that we try to neutrally look at all takes, all ideologies, and so on. Being neutral and objective, however, doesn't necessarily mean that we don't conclude one stance is better than another. It simply means that we try our best to be fair and represent the opposite side argument, all sides of the argument, as fairly as possible. That's our objective. It doesn't mean that we don't lean to a particular conclusion, right? It's like writing an essay. When you write an essay or court case, there's a prosecutor and a defense. The judge would look at everything neutrally, but that doesn't mean he might not conclude that the defense is winning or the prosecution is winning, right? So that's the first thing I just want to distinguish between neutrality and objectivity and thinking somebody has won or thinking one side is better than the other. And the other thing is that if you look through our videos in the past, we've been doing that. We've made many streams where we criticize even atheistic arguments. We look through many different viewpoints. Our videos are there for anybody to look through how we operate. We're very meticulous in doing it. But yeah, so yeah, let's begin.
All right, good. Yeah, that's great. To clarify, Madan, let's begin. All right.
My voice was good. My voice was
yeah,
okay
voice is
there?
good. Voice is good. Yes, yes.
Let's suppose there is no God.
All right. Just one thing I want to ask you: what speed should I run this? Right now, it's running 1.5, so that's too fast, I guess, right?
Yeah, make it closer to normal, I think. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
so
have
let's
only...
keep it at 1.25. Let's
All
keep it
right.
at 1.25.
Let's suppose there is no omniscient one, no omnipotent one, no all-knowledgeable one, no all-powerful one, no necessary being. Let's suppose, no problem. What do we have? What are the explanations that we have? That the universe came from nothing. But we know from nothing, nothing comes, because nothing is the absence of something. That the universe is self-generated. But we know that that's a contradiction, because the universe cannot generate itself, exist and not exist at the same time. So what do we know? What do we know? We know there exists a universe. We know I exist. We know you exist. We know Oppenheimer exists. And Fraser exists. And hopefully some of the explosions today, except for the argument that we just had. And I will say that when you know that the dependent existences exist, you have two options. Either you have a chain, a finite chain. A depends on B, or B depends on A, C depends on B. In which case A is the beginning of that chain. We, the Muslims, call that the necessary being, the independent one, God. Obviously, the atheists cannot subscribe to that theory. Let's move away from that one, please. So what do we have left? We have an infinite chain. An infinite chain of dependent things. But an infinite chain of dependent things is an absurd proposition. The reason being, because if this was actualized in the actual world, for example, through an infinite amount of multiverses, then it would imply that the inexhaustible has been exhausted. The unlimited has been limited, which is a contradiction, which is absurd. It would also imply that infinite sets exist within infinite sets, which means that the part is equivalent to the whole, but the part is defined by most mereologists as a portion of the whole, which is an absurdity itself and a contradiction. So let's suppose God doesn't exist. What can you atheists actually present and put on the table? You've got nothing. And the best Mr. Faisal could actually put to the table is to say, naturalism can explain just as well, he says. He's not even trying to say it's better. He's trying for equality. He's got a Nelson Mandela approach to the situation. He does. Also why? In a different manner? Because in an intellectual way, we will conclude, therefore, that a necessary being through which everything depends upon is independent in and of itself, and everything depends upon is the only way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Martin, were you asking to stop the video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mohammed Hijab's ranting was so loud that we couldn't even hear each other for a bit.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I notice here is that there's a lot of humor involved, right? And I just want to note that there was no humor involved in the atheist's argument, right? And humor is okay as as like a form of persuasive speech, but what with my background in law, I have a background in law and background in philosophy as well, and so on. And one of the first things that we kind of learn is that when you engage in humor, it's a means to persuade, right? Or demonstrate strength in your argument, because humor creates charisma, and charisma creates allure, and allure creates magnetism, right? And it creates the sense of a feeling of being successful. So that's the first thing that I just want to note with Hijab's presentation that I don't like compared to the atheist's presentation. From a persuasive point of view, he's doing great. Right? From a technical point of view, I'm just wondering why is he needing to do that? Because
I think Madin, it's not only humor, but it's kind of slight bit condescending. I mean, humor is one thing, but it's like slight bit demeaning. It's not, it's the downright demeaning, but it's in that sense. So it's a little bit more than humor, I would say, right? It's a slight bit condescension in a sense, I would say. But sorry, go ahead, please, with your thought.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and I'm just wary about these sort of types of arguments. I do engage in this sort of stuff myself sometimes, right? But with when I'm talking to in a technical way in order to find out the truth, I try to eliminate or reduce humor and denigration and dehumanization as much as possible. Reason being because it's frowned upon amongst academic circles, yeah, And even in a court setting, right? Because the judge wants you to know, judge wants to see things in an emotionless sense, in an objective sense. They want to see things cold. They don't want to let the emotions rile things up, right? And in many circles, I've been punished for it. I've been told not to do that. This is good for political debates, however, if you want to arouse the masses. On the other hand, outside of that circle, in a technical format, it's not very good because it's almost considered intellectual dishonesty. So, as you said, denigration, attacks on the personality, and just and humor. These things are, I would say, somewhat deceptive tools in a debate. Now, let's see what happens. Other than that, hijab is talking about the contingency argument there, I think, right? And so far, so good. I don't like the exact same type of presentation that he's making here with the contingency argument. I think it's the contingency argument.
Right, Madin, just want to point a few things here in with the contingency argument. I think if you remember our stream on nothingness, right? And we did kind of highlight this point that talking about infinities is so hard, basically. And if anybody's listening to this conversation, I would recommend them to hear out our very first stream that we did on nothingness, basically, or concept of nothingness. So when you make statements like out of nothing, nothing comes, nothing is absence of anything, very much, it's a very much, at sometimes it's very much wordplay in a sense, you're just churning out word porn, basically, in a sense, to use it mildly, basically. And when this whole thing, out of nothing, nothing comes, this statement you make and then take it on to a particular god, that kind of becomes problematic, but probably we're going to come to it, so let me not jump the gun.
In respect to that, I think at least me and Philo's opinion, Kylie wasn't around for our first stream, but me and Philo's opinion is that nothing is indeed possibly an absurd concept. So I am in agreement with Mohammed Hijab here. So he's correct, I think. And my rational intuitions, as far as they go through analysis, seems to suggest that the total absence of nothing, absolute nothing, is first of all, it's an absurdity. And we went through that in great detail. We gave an entire stream on that, why that's the case. Although we fleshed out different sides of the argument, we leaned in that direction. So me and Hijab, and maybe even Tzortzis, and maybe the entire Islamic, I don't know what group they belong to now. I think they belong to Sapiens. They used to be part of IERA. They for long made the argument that nothing nothing can't do anything. I think that might be correct in terms of analytical reasoning. At the same time, in the same stream that we talked about, our first one, we did mention that this sort of rational thinking can have difficulties in the sense that unveiling truths about the world through armchair reasoning has a very low efficacy rate. In other words, conjuring up how reality should be like from just our armchairs. We're not very good at doing that. Physics can be counterintuitive. Physics can be complex. Physics can be inhumane. It's hard to grasp. And we mentioned that in the first stream, and we mentioned that in an earlier stream, maybe the one before, maybe two streams before this, where somebody pointed out that how good is philosophy? How good is it? I think it's the stream on heaven. And we are actually
cosmic talked about that.
Cosmic Inquiry, and I introduced a book called Why Everything Must Go, or something like that. Everything Must Go, by a philosopher of science. So if there's any hijab fans out there, I would encourage them to look into that, because that goes on a full-on assault on this sort of philosophical thinking from your armchair. That a lot of things that philosophers have been thinking about for millennia are just been contradicted by science, empirical studies. Empiricism doesn't necessarily conform to our intuitive thinking about things. And I mentioned this in our first stream as well, when we concluded that rationally it does seem like from nothing, nothing comes, or nothing can't even exist. It's absurd. Yeah, agreement with Hijab there. But also we put the caveat, the disclaimer that, hold on a minute, Science, however, has this thing about it that which shows that things that we initially thought was correct through armchair thinking has a devastating failure rate. So we have to be very careful before investing things into that. We should, and therefore the best philosophy is the one that incorporates science into its base. Like the philosophy of mind incorporates cognitive sciences, right, into its base. The philosophy in general should take into account the philosophy of physics and physics. And there's a lot of disagreement between physicists and philosophers. And ultimately, I would say that the best philosophy will be those conducted by interdisciplinary lessons, where there are people who are trained on philosophy and physics. For example, exactly. For example, the Professor Sean Carroll he's trained in philosophy as well, and he sees no issue with nothing. Yeah, he sees no issues with nothing.
Right.
He doesn't think it's logically contradictory or metaphysically absurd. And if you talk to him, he'd probably say, he'll give you reasons why he thinks such a thing, right? Whereas we gave the reasons thinking that without nothing, there would be no logical laws. Without something, and a total absence of nothing, there would be no logical laws. And there will be nothing to hold or prevent nothing from being something, right? There's no law preventing nothing to be nothing, and therefore nothing will be inherently unstable. And if it's inherently unstable, it'll have infinite possibilities.
Right.
And that sounds like a contradiction, because if nothing can also be inherently unstable, that linguistically sounds weird, right? Whereas Sean Carroll, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, he thinks that there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing will be inherently unstable. So philosophers have different intuitions about this. We need to stress that. Anyway,
Exactly.
I'm talking to you. Yeah.
Let's move on and then come back to contingency. Okay.
Does Kylie want to say something?
Kylie, sorry.
No, I mean, I just comment that particularly what you just said, that about armchair reasoning that we engage in, particularly further, the complexity or the issue, it becomes even more difficult when we are talking about something that is beyond time and space and immaterial, or an immaterial realm, where we are not even able to use our normal logical reasoning. The causality, all that also goes out the window in such a level of existence. So reasoning, or applying our reasoning to that kind of reality, it becomes even more difficult. So even our science wouldn't apply there. So just wanted to add that. And in fact, when we go on to discuss, when we'll go to the cross questioning section of this debate, I think Hijab would also point towards that in a way. He would agree that there are some concepts which are only absurd when we apply them in space, time, and material world, but would not apply in an immaterial world. So we can also just go into further detail.
And just to emphasize, we're not just saying that because we're critiquing hijab. We did an entire stream on the problems of heaven, and then one of our fellow atheists pointed out, how do you know that the heaven will have to obey our human level logic or thinking? And we agreed that, and that's how we started talking about how armchair reasoning might have a failure rate. We raised that in that topic. So it's not just something that we arbitrarily raising here, that armchair reasoning might have a failure rate. Is that armchair reasoning, we engage in armchair reasoning as a philosopher a lot, a priori, rationalist method, etc., these sort of things. But we have to put that caveat there, and that it has limits, significant limits. And but even if we assume it works, we can still look at it through the perspective of armchair reasoning and actually find flaws. In the same way he's finding problems with nothing, we can find problems with the concept of heaven, the concept of God, etc. Because you can't pick and choose when armchair reasoning doesn't apply, right?
Right. And whenever it's convenient for you or for your worldview.
That applies to both atheists and theists. So what we're going to do in this is probably point out, here's the problems with Hijab's argument, and give armchair reasoning of our own, and at the same time say, even our armchair reasoning might not work, etc.
Right, exactly. I think both of us on the same plane in that term, basically,
Yeah.
at least in that regard. All right, shall we move on then to
Yes.
Sure.
To make sense of dependent things. You see, contingent things cannot exist within necessary things. A contingent thing is possible, can exist or not exist. A necessary thing is not possible, it's impossible not to exist. In other words, contingencies cannot exist within necessities. The existence of dependent things, the existence of this young man here, the handsome one, and Oppenheimer. His forefathers led to a lot of people's non-existence. No, your forefathers, but you know the other Oppenheimer. Their existence indicates without shadow of a doubt that a necessary being is required. So what kind of necessary being is this? We know I'm different to him, and we know he's different to him, and we know you're different to him. Differentiation indicates possibility and contingency. And wherein there is differences, and possibility and contingency therein, there must be an explanation for this. And what is the explanation for this? Islamic theism says, an external sorting agent, which specified and particularized things to be a certain manner, which indicates a choice had to be made. And this, we would say, indicates a chooser, a willer, which we would say is the will of God. So already we've identified that you have to have something which is independent and necessary, post-eternal and pre-eternal, to break away from the infinities and have a will. What do we call that? We call that God. Yes, we do. And it's the only explanation that doesn't lead to contradiction and absurdity. I challenge anybody here today to give me another explanation that doesn't lead to contradiction and absurdity. You see, I finished quite early.
Right.
all right. A lot of theatricals, basically, a lot of theatrics, basically, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think? Yeah,
Yeah.
Madan, go ahead, please.
One thing that kind of strikes me here is that he's kind of not explaining his terms, like what's the necessary. I've seen better presentations of the contingency argument. He's not explained what is a contingent thing and what's a necessary thing. I think maybe the emotions have kind of made him skip over that part.
Taken over him, basically. Yeah.
So I'm a bit confused what he means here, right? When he started talking about contingent, necessary, this, that dependent differentiation. What is he
I think
saying?
he did hint at a necessary thing cannot not exist, basically. That's his point.
Yeah.
But that was just a very brief introduction into what necessary being is, or necessary
Yeah, but
right,
compared to
existence.
Oppenheimer, is it Oppenheimer, the atheist, his name? Is that correct?
Oppenheimer
Yes.
is Mark Oppenheimer, right?
Is that the first atheist that we?
No, the first atheist is
First, Aaron Fesser.
Aaron Fasser or Fasser.
Right. I'm just wondering why he's referring to Oppenheimer here a lot when Oppenheimer hasn't spoken yet.
Maybe, yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
Because Oppenheimer being, it's recently quite a phenomena right now, because of the movie,
The
and
movie
plus
Oh,
Oppenheimer is a very
yeah.
well-known name, so he has been using Oppenheimer. And I watched the stream partially in which Hijab and Hamza Tzortzis actually discussed the debate on Daniel Hekikaju's channel. And so there they mentioned that before the debate they sort of agreed, or they were discussing the kinds of jokes they're going to make with Oppenheimer and all this, blasting it away or nuking their arguments and all kinds of puns. So they had all this planned out actually.
That's
with
really.
Oppenheimer. Was that discussed with Oppenheimer or was it behind the scenes?
No,
No, of course not.
They
No,
knew
no.
what Callie's saying is they
their
knew
opponent.
about
Yeah,
Oppenheimer.
I get it.
Right.
No, I get it. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't misunderstand.
No, they didn't. Of course, they didn't
Yeah.
discuss it with Oppenheimer.
All right, I thought it might have been like a planned. I would have thought that would be nice of them at least. Can we just?
I don't think we cannot expect this much courtesy
Yeah.
from them.
Maybe not, yeah. But I would have thought it would have been nice. But no, this is it's a bit below the belt. Let's be honest.
It is definitely, yeah.
Like the
Quite
first
a- quite-
atheist did not
Quite a
make
few
any.
blows below the belt, basically.
Yeah, like you'd expect religious people not to do that. Come on, the atheist looks a lot better here in the sense that the atheist here, the first one at least.
I mean, people are gonna be saying that you guys are partial, you guys are biased because you guys are kind of you align with the atheists and all those things. But it's hard not to criticize Hijab and Tzortzis because of the kind of theater he has presented over here. I mean, just look at the kind of composure with which Aaron had presented his arguments. and see the contrast, the stark contrast. First thing first, I mean, the very posture is he's standing up. He wants to present his authority. I mean, this is not just me looking at it and saying this. This seems to be a deliberate tactic to me, at least.
Yeah. But Philo, I mean, people might think that we're biased. It's not about bias. It's about figuring out the bad arguments, right? It's filtering out the bad arguments, right? If a person has a poor deck in their hands, who do you think the person would be? The one who needs to conceal, cover up, mask the deficiencies, the inadequacies of one's argument. It'll be the one who wants to do everything else other than technical merit to boost his argument. So it's not necessarily bias noticing that one of the features of a Dawa person here is as somebody has made a comment right now by Mududaku. I'll take his word here. Showmanship. One of the features of Dawa persuasion is showmanship, and that is also a criticism, because if showmanship is used to that extent, we could criticize the flowery speech, or the fact that somebody is using aggression or hand waving and dismissals as a poor technical technique, a great persuasive technique for those who fall for it, but a poor technical technique to get to the truth, right? Here I'm listening to a debate to find out who's right. It's like a mathematical equation. Imagine if a mathematician started joking and hiding these arguments when you were wearing a nice tie and dancing and
or shouting for heaven's sake.
Yeah, because we know from lots of studies, that people who shout like Adolf Hitler, they create a more persuasive argument, right? They create more persuasive argument. The frontal cortex actually decreases in cortical activity, and you're more likely to accept their arguments. Now, that is a critique as well. So you can make a critique, but if we're critiquing everything here, a critique of an argument would be also the presentation of the argument. And
exactly, yeah.
If there's anybody here who wants to know the truth, and there's somebody who's shouting and jumping around and doing backflips, verbal acrobatics, and pumping his chest, we need to point that out. And a good debater on the other side would also point that out, so that we ask the audience not to look past that and look at the mathematical equation that's been presented. Yeah. We're not naive children. We're not innocent children, kids. We're not emotional crybabies. We want to hear the truth in a very, very obvious fact-based manner. So what is with this showmanship? Are you a car salesman? Yeah, car salesmen do that, right? Are you who want to sell you a car? That is a part of the criticism. It's not necessarily a bias. It's just recognizing that this is a flaw rather than a good thing. It's a good thing.
No, I'm saying why these people. I mean, these people shouldn't think that we are biased, because we are presenting a case here that these are tactics, and we are exposing these tactics basically. And this is not the first time, Madin, you and I are looking at these tactics. We have been looking at these tactics for past 10, 11 years, I think. Remember the first time I think I met you over the Facebook, and we used to go and have debates with these guys, especially the IR guys. Mohammed Hijab was not in the scene basically at that time, but Hamza Tzortzis was a pretty much a big name of IR at that time. But their tactics were, to be fair to Tzortzis, he's much more milder than Hijab, but they still had those same tactics. I mean, just to shoot and scoot probably a policy, and just removing you from a thread if you raise some points against some things, right? So, but anyways, yeah, I mean, this is a criticism, because if you have fair points, I mean, this applies to anybody and everybody. If you have fair points and your arguments are very strong, your arguments should stand alone without any theatrics, pretty much. At least that's my belief. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of mood that lots of courts and justice systems and academic debates are going towards, right? Theatrics is frowned upon, because people want to know whether your argument is correct based on the substance and the content of your argument, not how loud you shout, not whether you wear a nice tie, whether you say stuff like, "I've just finished my argument,"
Right.
Confidence, that might work amongst the complete lay audience, but amongst professionals and proficient thinkers and philosophers and lawyers, we all know what they're doing. It's like a snake oil charmer or a salesman. That's what they do.
Right.
I just want to point that out for the audience here. That is part of our criticism as well. That's going to
Right,
be
right.
that's going to be like an overarching theme here. That
Right, that's going to be an
anyone who
overarching.
engaging in these rhetorical flares, we're going to hold it against him rather than for him.
Right, right. Madan, just taking up, Kylie, I'll give you a minute to talk. You haven't spoken in a while, but just taking Summer's comments here. Summer, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know you promote our streams a lot and our channel a lot and other streams. So I'll request you to keep doing that. Keep making sure that people come and watch our stream as well. We definitely could do away with couple of 100 guys, or at least, to start off with at least 100 guys, 100 plus guys, right? So thank you again for doing this. Hello, Summer writes, hello, please like and share the stream. Thanks, Summer, for doing that for us. Give him at least 100 plus watching. Thanks again, Summer. And yes, I'm pretty sure that you guys are going to keep helping us, you and Pratik and other guys. So we do appreciate it. Kelly, please.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have said a lot about this, and I don't think I need to add too much. I just say that the point of raising this or sort of highlighting this point is to make at least the Muslim audience aware that this is the kind of tactics that they're using uh, to even if they believe that the argument is strong, they are trying to add on to this argument, to the argument, or trying to at least pose as if their argument is stronger than it actually is, by through their showmanship. So the audience should be aware of this tactics or this kind of showmanship, and they should try to at least be remove this, and to listen to the argument, and setting aside the kind of the showmanship that he's presenting. So that is the whole point, just to be aware of the kind of effects that such showmanship has on our psyche, and so that we
Yeah.
can actually go to the gist of the argument instead of focusing on the kind of confidence that he's giving off during the presentation. So that should be ignored. That just the argument, the very what are the key arguments that he is presenting, that should be the focus.
Yeah, wonderful point by Khayali. Khayali, this is exactly the point, and you can see. I mean, just elaborating on this point, you can see the in the background, the crowd. They are, plotting this childish behavior. Sorry to say this childish behavior, but they are
Yeah.
applauding. So even if any one of those guys listens to this, the request is to listen to his arguments, weigh his arguments on the basis of the logic he's presenting, and just rationalize it within yourself, and if they make sense or not. If they make sense, then okay, you're bound to believe them. I mean, you should believe them, basically. But if you're applauding him just because of this theatrics, then that's hard for me to say. I mean, I'll be inclined to say that probably I mean, I would rather not say anything other than this. Martin, you wanted to add something, I think, right?
No, yeah, I would say that if you want to hear a good articulation of the contingency argument, read essays by Alexander Pruss. He even someone like Edward Feather, he kind of makes like an Aristotelian argument, very similar to the contingency argument. These are far better and they're written down, and they're essays, and they're emotion free. They're more like mathematical equations. Then you get to be, if you're an intellectual, if you're seeking the truth, you should sit down and think about it without the theatrics, without the showmanship, because delivering a particular sentence with some oomph and grandstanding can change the message itself. A weak argument can be stated in such a dramatic way that it creates the impression that it's right. Write it down on paper, and then remove all of the antics from the voice. Write it on paper. Look at it transcribed, and then look at the argument and see whether it holds out. Then compare it with atheistic arguments, like people like Dr. Graham Oppie, who criticizes the contingency argument. Who's and then you can actually make a fair assessment. That's how I did it. That's how I look at it. I don't watch Romeo and Juliet when I want to figure out philosophy, right? I don't want theatrics. I don't want theatrical presentations. I actually want a good, strong equation. That's how my brain is engineered.
Right, right. And should we then start poking holes in this contingency argument now?
Let him finish, because he says he's
I
almost
think he's
finished.
done, right? He says he's done.
He's done with the argument, and I think now he's just going to discuss something else. I think
Yeah,
Let's
he's
see.
he's done with that
Yeah.
argument, right? He's.
Yeah.
Shall we start poking holes in the contingency argument then? What do you think?
Let him
So-
let him see what he goes on to say first. Let's see what he
okay.
goes on to say.
So let's see.
I've got more to say. I've got more to say, which is, okay, you said fine. I understand the situation. I agree with you, no problem. But why do you say that Islam is true? Before we get there, one more prerequisite must be made. How could there be only one of these? How come there's not three? For example, the triune situation. Because if there was an individuating factor that individuated and differentiated necessary being A from necessary being B, that would render either or both of them contingent. Because a contingent thing is differentiated in reality. And a necessary being cannot be differentiated from something else. But I'll give you an easier argument, which is the Quranic argument. مَا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَلَدٍ وَمَا كَانَ مَعَهُ مِنْ إِلَهٍ إِذًا لَذَهَبَ كُلُّ إِلَهٍ بِمَا خَلَقَ وَلَعَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Chapter 23, verse 91, that there couldn't be more than one God effectively because they would outstrip one another in power. There cannot be more than one overall power because an all-powerful agent by definition, yes, means that he has power over all other things. Nothing can supervene on his power capabilities. Moreover, there cannot be more than one overall will. لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. In chapter 21, verse number 22. If there was in them, i.e. the heavens and the earth, more than one, the heavens and the earth would have been corrupt. Meaning what? You have to have one overriding will. Because there had been more than one will, it wouldn't be consistent. You couldn't explain the uniformity, the regularity, the stability of the universe. Because there is uniformity, stability, and regularity. Without it, you couldn't even do science. And there is uniformity, stability, and regularity to the extent which it allows life to exist on the universe. That's a fact no one here will deny. There is life on the universe, and that the universe is uniform and regular and stable enough to allow such life to exist. What is the best explanation for this? One singular overarching will that doesn't lead to conflict. So that's why it's one God. But what about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now, there's many things I can say, and in 7 minutes, I'll just mention one evidence. There are necessary and sufficient conditions for a word of God to be conceived as such, the word of God. I would put to the
I
table
think
today
now he's going to
that one of the
present.
necessary conditions is that this cannot contain any contradictions.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah,
All
I mean,
right,
I think
Martin,
now he's going
you're-
to present a positive case for Islam, which I think is quite. It's a different topic than the
Yeah, it's a different
the
topic.
contingency argument. So yeah.
Right.
So, Philo, did you ask me something?
All right. No, that's what I was wondering. Whether should we stop and then cover the contingency part?
I didn't hear the. If I have to be honest, I didn't hear the contingency argument spelled out properly.
No, so I think he did make the contingency argument, of course, to a layman who has a person who has no idea. He didn't give enough background.
Yeah,
But I think what he did actually the entire gist was it was actually the contingency argument, because he said that there cannot be an infinite set of independent things. So there must be a necessary being upon which all the dependent things rely on for their
Depend on, right.
existence.
Right.
Depend on for their existence. And so that is how he concluded that there should be a necessary existence. And then he went on to explain or to argue that how does it prove that necessary existence is actually a will or a mind. That he explained via the concept of differentiation and limited and the limitation in the creation. So he said that since everything that we see, the universe and everything within the universe, has certain specific characteristics. So there are certain characteristics through which we can differentiate something from the other, meaning those particular attributes that creation or existence has could have been something else. And that's why I use the word possibility. And he said that since there is everything has a specific attribute or some specific attributes which could theoretically be
Could have
something
been
else,
something different. Yeah.
could have been something different. Therefore, there must be an explanation. So he was, sort of indicating or implying the PSR, what
Contingency
we
of
call
these beings,
the
basically.
the PSR, the principle of sufficient reason.
Yeah.
So according to him, there must be a sorting agent who would assign these specific attributes to these different entities, and that sorting agent needs to be, and therefore he says that sorting, the process of sorting implies that there is
A
a free
sorter.
will involved in over there. So which means that the necessary existence would have free will, and that is how he concluded that since a necessary existence who has free will would mean that he's a god, and that's how he sort of concluded. That was in a way his whole argument.
Yeah, I think you elaborated a lot more there than he did, though. To be honest, he kind of
Yeah,
Right, right,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Maybe it's
exactly.
the
I,
speed
I
of
think I think Khali could be a much better Muslim apologist than Hijab can be.
Yeah,
just walked over it, and
but then I'm
Khali, I see a bright future for you, mate.
but then in the very next part I will go on to prove that this proves Islamic god. So
yeah.
the contingency arguments are,
Right, right, right.
so yeah,
Yeah.
Mahadin, so
So, Madhan,
what do you think about this?
what are some of the problems that plague this argument, basically, so
Well,
to speak?
there are numerous things. I mean, first of all, the idea of dependent things and independent things, contingent things, versus necessary things, etc. It's a difficult distinction to make in and of itself, right?
Right, right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, he doesn't really explain how certain things are contingent. It could, and he probably would use the principle of sufficient reason to suggest that a contingent thing could have been in a different way. A contingent thing
Yeah,
they didn't have to be in this particular way. It's dependent,
yeah,
therefore, it's
it is
dependent
a,
thing.
a contingent
Whereas,
thing is anything which could have been any other way.
yeah,
It's just
Yeah,
exactly.
this is a huge problem because when you say contingent thing is something that could have been otherwise, it's very hard to
Yeah,
justify that, basically, because all you see is could be there's only one way in which the whole world could have been, and you can argue very well that everything is almost pretty much dependent, and then the illusion of being contingency or being
yes.
contingent is
Well,
just an illusion, basically. And
exactly. If you look at it from through a deterministic paradigm, for example,
right,
if you
it's
look
a
at
deterministic
yeah,
paradigm, basically,
deterministic
exactly.
paradigm, then if the first event, let's say the first cosmic, causal, orderly event, whatever you want to call it might not be an event, it might not be in time, it might be in time, whatever you want to call it, was necessary, then it follows also then everything else was necessary,
Right. I
right?
mean, you can say if the cause after that was necessary because P implies Q, then Q
Yes,
is also necessary, pretty much.
yes,
And then if you
absolutely
say
right.
from Q it implies R or something like that, then R is also necessary. And you can have this
Exactly.
chain of necessary events, which you can't tell that anything is dependent on something else, and everything becomes pretty much necessary.
Exactly. Yeah. The idea that, for example, the planets were contingent. Well, no, planets were caused by certain cosmic events. Well, then those cosmic events were caused by certain other cosmic events, and so on and so on and so on. And they could the planets have been any other way? Not necessarily. And no. What they mean is that philosophically, in principle, it's logically possible that the planets could not have existed, right? Whereas a necessary being is not logically possible that it could not have existed. And let's say a necessary being is the laws of logic. In every possible world, the laws of logic must exist, because otherwise we have to think in one possible world there is no laws of logic. And how we figure that out is through our armchair. We might think of a potential world where there are no laws of logic. Well, that world would be simultaneously true and false, right? And that leads to absurdities. And somebody may say that can't be possible. Or, for example, maybe there's a world where a square doesn't have 90-degree angles, right? So if squares exist, then every possible world where a square exists, it will also have four 90-degree angles. But therefore, a square is a necessary entity. A square is a necessary truth. Sorry, let me be more clear. Squares have four sides, and there are four angles that add up to, that each angle, is a 90 degrees, is a necessary
Right.
truth.
And
Right?
each side is the same. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's a necessary truth, because we can't even think of any other possible world. And in philosophy, we think about possible worlds to do this experiment in order to figure out, distinguish between contingent statements or contingent propositions and necessary propositions. And someone would say the square is a necessary proposition, being that we can't even think of one exception where this alternative reality, alternative dimension, alternative world, the square doesn't have four sides and each one has 90 degrees in each corner. We can't even think of that, right? And therefore it's necessary. That's kind of like the kind of thing that you want to do to establish necessariness. And how we also talked about in our first stream about nothing is necessary. Something is necessary. Nothing is not. Nothing is impossible. I can't think of any possible world where nothing can exist. That's the kind of thing that he's trying to do here. But the issue here with the universe, when you apply this sort of thinking to the universe, we can't know whether or not it could have been the case that planets were a contingent thing. In other words, philosophically, we may do the following. I can think of one possible world where there is no planets. Therefore, it could have been that the planets didn't exist, and therefore the planets are contingent. So that's one way to do it. So I distinguish now the planet from the square, right? The square is necessary because it has to exist in every possible world. If it's a square, then it has to exist with four sides. That has to be true in all possible worlds. On the other hand, planets are not like that, right? I can actually imagine planets not existing, or I can imagine a planet being the color red instead of the color blue. Therefore, those are contingent properties or contingent propositions. The issue with that is, and that's how you may argue it, that's why the planets are contingent and certain other things are necessary. My issue with that is that basically what we said first, if planets are determined by predecessor events, in other words, there was a causal event prior to that of the formation of a planet that was dependent upon another causal event, and it all goes back to some necessary event, right? Then by definition, every one of those subsequent events in the chain, including the planets, are also necessary. As you said, P
Right.
is necessary, then Q is necessary, right? If P is necessary, then Q also must be necessary.
Right.
If P, then Q. Similarly, so. If then planets are also necessary, we are also necessary. Water is necessary. Everything is necessary. The universe is necessary.
You can take it up to Big Bang or whatever before that, and so I mean it's all right. You're right about that.
Yeah, that's one. I don't want to go. I don't want to exhaust everything. I want to give.
Kelly, you have something to say? Yeah.
No, I mean, So just to elaborate on the explanation that you were giving, that in a way we gave the example of a square and explained that a square necessarily needs to be comprising of four sides. So there cannot be a square with three sides. So similarly, this being just an example of something that we actually know and understand to be necessarily true about a square. Similarly, what you're trying to say is that when a planet exists, not only it exists in a certain place, in a certain form, with a specific composition, it appears to us that it could have been another way, but it is not. It could not be, because it is linked with a long chain of causes and effects behind it, which led to it being in this way. And that's why it's calling or considering this planet to be contingent wouldn't be correct. You'd have to say that it's necessary. But no, I mean, let's just to get your point of view on this. So what if the objection on your explanation is that the very first cause what you're trying to imply in that case is that whatever has happened, the very first cause that happened, it led to all of this, and that first cause also could not have been any other way. So what I'm trying to say is, this is often quoted that the universe has, for example, some what we call cosmological constants. Now, these cosmological constants, it is presented, or the argument goes like this: that the cosmological constants could have been any other way, and in that scenario, everything the way it is right now would not have been the way it is. In fact, it probably would have been, in fact it would most certainly would have been any other way, or it might not have been been there in the first place, because if there had been the gravity had been a lot stronger, the universe would have collapsed onto itself back, into a singularity. If it had been, the gravity would have been a lot weaker, then it's the atoms or molecules would expand or move away so fast that nothing would actually um, come together to form something. So what would you say to that? Would you apply a similar reasoning to that?
Yeah.
I can
No,
how you could apply to that, but
I think
I think it's better to explain it.
All right,
yeah.
just I'll make one correction, Khali here, right? So the example that you gave of fine tuning, right? And you said cosmological constants, right? So cosmological constant is just one constant, but those the term you want to probably use, and correct me if I'm
Cosmology.
wrong, is physical constants of the universe. Basically, those
So
are there are about 26 physical constants of the
so
universe, right? Avogadro's
so
constant,
I
right?
said cosmological constants. I don't think there's anything called cosmological constant in itself. There are cosmological constants that there
No, no,
are
no.
around 20 to
So
26.
there is. So Einstein's field equation has cosmological constant.
Oh,
I
okay,
mean,
then I might be
yeah,
missing
right.
that.
So
Yeah.
that's
So,
the cosmological constant is the
yeah.
one that you're talking about, right? The
No,
expansion
I'm
rate
talking
and the
about all the constants that this universe has.
yeah. So they're called the fundamental constants of the
Fundamental
universe. They
fundamental
include
constants.
the weight of the electron or the
Yeah, yeah,
weight of the neutron, proton,
exactly,
Avogadro's number, the Planck number, Planck constant, and
exactly.
all those. So they're about 26, but they're roughly they assumed to be around 19 in number or something like that, basically, because
Right.
some of them are kind of could be derived from others and stuff, right?
You're
So
right.
that's the current understanding, at least in the physics community, basically. So
No,
but
you're
you're
right.
right,
Thank you
you're
for
right
that.
about that cosmological constant. If it were to be a little, 1 by 1 by 10 to the power 60th here or there, then either the universe would before expanding, it would collapse in itself, or just keep expanding forever, and there won't be any galaxies or anything forming basically from that. All right.
Mhm.
So
So yeah,
cosmic
Mahadan, what do you think? Yeah, you're reading the comment. File?
Shall I read just Cosmic's comment here? Case in point, when he debated Cosmic Skeptics some 4 years ago, he made it point to repeatedly state that Cosmic got a chapter of utilitarianism wrong. And someone pointed out, yeah, we remember. I think that that incident happened. That there was some, I think, John Stuart Mill's book or some book. I think he
Yes.
was talking regarding, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Yes, and then was wrong. He kept it under wraps rather than admitting the mistake. He did admit his mistake much later in one of his response videos. Probably he made that video much later, probably after being pressurized by his followers for weeks and weeks. He did that. And someone in the comments said he did that because he's more interested in appearing right than what truth is. You might be right. I mean, cosmic. I probably might be biased when I'm saying this, but then that's how much I have observed of Mohammed Hijab. That's kind of the aura he exudes, basically. That's what the kind of, not aura, maybe aura is a little too positive word for him, but that's kind of the appearance he exudes, basically. Yeah. And hi guys, I'll be tuning in for most of this, but won't be able to join today. Okay, all right. I was thinking maybe you'd join and say a few things, but enjoy the stream nonetheless, right? Kelly, sorry, you were making a point. I stopped you in between.
No, so I raised my point, and I think Madin, did you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
my
I'm
question?
supposed
Yeah,
to. He's asking me a
okay, let's
question. Yeah.
yeah.
So, in respect to like fine tuning and cosmological constants and all those other variables, how things could have been differently, I think that's completely compatible with determinism. The idea that the universe is deterministic, let's say at a quantum level and so on, and the physics is still out on that, right? But I think there is quite a bit suggesting it probably is. A lot of people think that that's completely consistent with the idea that that there are narrow range of parameters that the universe had to fill. I don't think there's any contradiction between the two things. In the same sense, let me give you the same sense. In the same sense that other than Kylie, it could have been Haroon, who may have been the child of Kylie's parents, right? Or not just Haroon, it could have been a million others, right? But the specific sperm cell met the specific egg cell, and Kylie was produced, thankfully. Yeah, because without that, we won't be having this discussion today. I think Haroon might have been a different person, but yeah. So that's a sort of kind of rare event and alternative possibilities that could have arisen. But determinists agree with that in principle that there was all these other possibilities, but because the atomic and quantum events were such stringently necessitated by a chain of events that technically Kylie was the only one that was going to get produced, right? Because of the initial event. Yeah, whatever happens is ultimately what must have happened, only could happen. So the rest of it is merely somewhat theoretical. So I think you can be a determinist and believe that the universe has fine-tuned parameters or something. Or when they say that, physicists use fine-tuning in a different manner to atheist debates, but they think it's more of an error in their equations or something like that. I can't go deeply into that, but you can consistently believe that there were all these other possibilities, and at the same time think it's determined. In the same sense, it was also possible that someone other than Kylie being conceived, because it's a theoretical possibility. It's more like not a real possibility, and that the reason Kylie was conceived was because of the causal events necessitated it to occur in that way, where that particular egg will meet that particular sperm cell, and that was due to causal events before it. And when you outline every single causal event, it's really just a very, very strict deterministic order of things. Those other possibilities were therefore not real possibilities. But we can still talk about it, right? Just because you're a determinist, you don't say that there weren't millions of sperm cells and that could have fertilized the egg. There were millions of sperm cells, but it was determined that one particular sperm cell will fertilize the egg. This exact same application should be made on a cosmic level as well. Yeah.
I think I agree. I mean, Martin, I agree to your point, and just want to the mischievous in me just sprang to action, and wanted to say this. If these all,
Wait. Below. Let's leave Kylie's parents out of this. This is not.
No. This is not about Kylie. This is
You don't
not
need to
about.
speak to the level of now.
No, I'm not even going there. I'm just talking about this idea that something could have happened in the past. Is this an idea? If all those things could have happened in the past, then inexhaustible could have been exhausted pretty much. You see
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make, the very strong argument that I made. Callie, you got that right? That's the
I
same
think I
argument he
got
has
it.
made. That's the same argument Hijab has made basically, right?
Right.
But
But
from the I mean the fine tuning is an argument which probably we'll tackle some other time, and let's move on to with
I think Kylie wants to make a point. I think still regarding this,
yeah,
maybe. I don't.
yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't link this to the fine tuning argument, because that is about the universe, or the constants being in the being very suitable, or at least suitable enough to give rise to a life, or living organisms. So
Yeah.
that wasn't the argument that I was making. But yes, I think in a way, Mahadin, you did address it. But let me put the argument, and let me, I think for me, the strongest version of it. What
Okay.
is the strongest version of it? And this is, I think it's there are different names to it. I think we would also call it the argument from limitation or selectivity, and that is what Hijab actually used. Of course, he didn't present it in the way that I'm going to present it, but he tried to prove the will or the free will or the God being or the necessary being, having free will and agency to select all these attributes and assigning them to different entities.
Hmm.
Now, the argument, let's say, goes like this: if something is unconscious, so let's say there's a necessary being, but isn't uh, conscious, that isn't God. It's an unconscious, or it's just
It's
a
just a
reality,
process, you
right?
can say.
Just
It's a
a
process,
process,
you
yeah.
can say.
Now, the question would be that I think, I don't know if you agree, but I think we do understand that the base reality would be unlimited, immaterial, timeless, and spaceless. I think my logical intuition leads me to that, but
Can you repeat that?
that's
Sorry, it's mindless,
the
spaceless, and
base, not mindless. I said that the base, the very first or the base reality would be, logically speaking, probably immaterial, timeless, spaceless. So
okay,
my
immaterial, timeless,
understanding is,
spaceless. Okay.
yeah. So in a way,
Mhm.
I would say that I do believe that there would be a necessary existence. I think so. But what I disagree with is that it would have consciousness. But how Muhammad Hijab is actually trying to prove it is, and of course, he didn't present it the way that I'm going to present it, but let me put it that way. If there is an entity which is timeless, spaceless, and is unlimited, so let's say it's a cause which is unlimited, the first cause, first unlimited cause. Now, an unlimited cause should give rise to an or an infinite cause should give rise to an infinite effect. But the effect should be unlimited or infinite in some way or form as well. But the creation that we see, the universe that we live in, is limited in many ways. And once again, by limited, I mean it has specific attributes. It is, let's say, it's of a specific shape. It is of a specific size. I know it has some limited space in it. So would do you think, do you get my argument? So until
So
and so the argument was like this: until and unless there is a conscious agent who actually limits it, uh, I would call it arbitrarily, and takes this infinite cause and you know uh, causes it to, or brings into effect something limited, and divides that cause, I would say, into some limited creations. That limitation, the effect of limiting something, requires a conscious agent. That is Muhammad Hijab's argument. What do you think are the problems with that argument? So an infinite cause, infinite blind and unconscious cause should lead to an infinite effect, not a limited effect that we see. What do you think?
so problem I'm thinking in my mind is, why can't you have an infinite effect but with a localized limitedness, basically?
Okay, well, for example, can you explain that?
You can think of multiverse as infinite universes, right? But still you can
Right,
assume that there is a pocket universe which harbors life, which is limited, right?
right, right.
So in that
So what?
sense, you still have the whatever the fundamental cause of the multiverse was, that is infinite, right? The cause is infinite. Multiverses are infinite as well, but then there is a localized universe which is limited. What is wrong with that is my
So
question to you.
for example, let's say there is 100 Newton of force that exists. Okay, and if that force is being applied, let's say there should be something to divide that force into, let's say, 10 Newton forces, or let's say 20 forces, 20 forces of each of 5 Newton. Do you get me? So what would cause that division, that limiting factor? So whatever the initial existence was, or the initial cause was there, what would cause it to give rise to limited effects? You're saying that there can be exist
Well,
pocket
I think
universes.
you're
What would cause it
we
to be limited?
yeah, I see your point, but I think that point is invalid in this sense, because you are assuming, you're seeing our world and thinking in that terms. You can put it like this: you see quantum entanglement, right? And
Mhm.
with the concept of quantum entanglement, right, you can say two causes can be infinitely apart but affect each other, right? You see the point I'm trying to
Yes,
make? Yeah,
yes,
right.
yes.
So that requirement of dividing is no more valid.
Yeah. And this is the problem. This is the problem with trying to do these thought experiments from your armchair. It's counterintuitive. It might seem counterintuitive, but the physics is counterintuitive.
Right. I
And
mean, you
Yeah.
can you can counter these. There are a lot of problems within the physics community. I mean, quantum entanglement is still not understood as to how it happens, but it does happen. That's the known knowledge, right? But that's bewildering. And the point being, there could be one proton on the one side of the universe and the other on the other. uh, you know uh, uh, they could have different spins, basically one up quark, one down quark, or something like that, and they could still be affecting each other, right? So that's kind of the bewildering physics that we are dealing with. And these kind of thought experiments kind of illustrate the point that physics is kind of, even though we understand it, but there are limits to our understanding. And when
Yeah.
it comes to hijab's example of dividing, I don't think it fits with the current understanding that we have, because even if we didn't know about quantum entanglement, there could have still been something else that could have given that idea that uh, two things could have been infinitely apart and yet could have just interacted with each other.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Right. At least that's my objection, at least to this point.
Just to echo some of Philo's points, I think one of the grand slam cases against hijab here would be the overarching emphasis on empiricism that he leaves out. This is very, very outmoded, outdated, 12th century type of thinking, where it's thinking about the universe in such a way that cavemen would think about it. Most physicists would frown upon this. It's not how the world works, and this is why you have books like Why Everything Must Go. He's a philosopher of science. I always forget his name who wrote that, but he's also got a lot of appreciation and accolades from the physics community. Is because a lot of our philosophy that we conduct, we when we try to imagine the universe with spaces and time and everything, is almost all flawed. And that's the purpose of the book, Why Everything Must Go. Everything must go because all of philosophy dealing with this sort of stuff, metaphysical quandaries and so on, must go because it has a really bad success rate. Empiricism shows that many of our intuitions just doesn't map to the reality. And therefore trying to think, an infinite thing, finite, it can only result to a infinitely impersonal cause would only lead to a finite effect or something like that. These things are just gobbledygook, according to I think you're bringing up the book. Yeah, Everything Must Go. So if anybody wants to read it, this book would probably render everything that's been discussed obsolete. It's unnecessary. It's a contingent fact what we're doing right now. It's not, yeah, it's not necessary to do this. We have to go into the physics to figure it out, and that might be and look, I'm saying that as a philosopher. I enjoy doing this. I like a priori armchair thinking, but I also know its limits, and I also put on the hat just to have like a fun when I'm like in a bar talking to people. But in reality, I have to say that it doesn't have the best success rate to do it like that. But putting the hat back on, then just thinking about it, can an infinite impersonal cause lead to a finite effect? And hijab, I think that's exactly how hijab might have presented it. Might not be exactly correct, but he thinks an agent, a mind, a consciousness requires an infinite effect to create the differentiation and separation.
Right.
And the
Exactly.
particulars.
That's his point.
Yeah.
That's
he
his
needs.
point, actually.
Yeah. And that is, I think, falls to these following problems. First of all, there's a problem of induction here, right? In the sense that we're using a very small amount of data to assume and make generalizations beyond the universe, right? A very few set of entities like minds are being used as causal agents to think only causal minds can create differentiation and separation. Only an infinite, and if you add the property of infinite to a mind with desires, then somehow this infinite mind with desires can create these finite structures, right? First of all, we've never seen an infinite mind, yeah, and we've never seen an infinite mind create finite structures. We've seen minds create finite structures, but this is a very different type of mind within this universe, within this
You've
spatial.
seen finite minds create finite structures,
yeah,
right?
in a spatio-temporal realm.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Making that leap beyond the universe leaves out a lot of potential data points that we just don't know about yet, right? So it's called it's a generalization fallacy or poor inference. And David Hume pointed this out a long time ago as well. David Hume, when he made the argument against design, it could be that on this planet, in this small location of the universe, that minds
You mean
create.
the non sequitur, right?
Yeah, it's too broad of a generalization to say
Right,
that
right.
the things that we know within this universe can be used and exhausted as a resource to talk about things outside of the universe. There could be very many other options that we just simply hasn't seen, right? And yeah, that would be one of the points. It's one of the reasons why, when William Lane Craig says the only things we know that are abstract objects, immaterial things, are minds and abstract objects like mathematics and logic. And then he concludes, well, minds and abstract objects like mathematics can't cause anything, therefore the cause behind the universe is mind. Well, how do you know those are the only couple of categories? How do you know those are the only immaterial entities? You see that?
Right, yeah.
We now in limited sort of exploration and adventures here on this tiny little spectre of the universe, micro spectrum of the universe.
It's a circular argument, because you're trying to understand the unlimited using your limited mind, basically. I mean, this is how it can be put, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to conjure up something. I don't know, conjure is probably used as a negative word, right? So you're trying to conjure up something that probably you have no inkling about, you haven't seen, you can't deduce it, you don't have any data points to extend up to that, and then you can come up with only a false dilemma, in a sense, pretty much. Basically, you think either this or that. That's about it.
And the history of humanity have shown that, where we can make poor inductive generalizations. For example, we thought it was the case that the sun was made out of fire, because the only thing that we know that was hot and orange like that was fire. And then we discovered nuclear energy. And now we know that the sun is like a nuclear fusion reactor or something, a thermonuclear event,
Right,
of
right.
hydrogen, right? So we had to rewrite our knowledge, because we used a poor inductive sample and generalized it beyond our parameters. Things that apply on planet Earth did not apply to the sun. And then now think of the infinite number of things that we discovered like that. When we got broader and broader out towards the universe, things change. We learn new things. So what makes it say, when William Lane Craig says that the only two things that we know that are immaterial is minds and abstract objects? Well, how do you know that those are the
How do
only
you
two
know
things?
that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It might be applicable, yes. And we've got justification for that, is because we made sort of poor inductive generalization routinely and historically for everything, which shows that we need more information and data to find out whether there's other sort of immaterial entities. And in this case where Hijab is talking, whether there's anything else that can cause differentiation and identification and all these other terms that he's used. What can an infinite impersonal event cause a finite thing? Well, we don't have the resources to conclude anything either way. But yeah, he's making a massive leap. And we've got the history of science and history of philosophy showing that whenever we make these poor leaps, we tend to be wildly wrong. So it has a poor success rate, and therefore anybody who's listening to this should, if they want to play their cards right, invest very little gambling money on that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Kyle, you want to add something to it?
Yeah, I mean,
Otherwise,
yeah,
yeah. Once you're done, I'll
yeah,
take Cosmic's comment.
sure.
Right.
So I mean, what I would say is that I think, you know, what I would say is that, and I think you've raised good points in response to this. And I think, let's say one possibility would be, let's say there is a natural, true random generator, let's call it that, within that ultimate base reality, which limits, which continuously generates random attributes, and that
Universes.
would lead to an infinite number of universes with infinite, each having its own attributes. So this true random might exist. Of course, we do have an example of something random in our, in our physics, which is the quantum field, and we do see that there is a lot of, we find something very close to truly random within the quantum,
Yeah.
field, in terms of where we'll find the particle. There's a kind of randomness in that. So
Right.
there
Also, the
there's a
quantum decay is
possibility.
also as random, right?
Sorry.
You pointed at one, and I was pointing at other one. The quantum decay, basically, the decaying of
Yeah, yeah, of course.
of an isotope, basically, is also
That's it.
quite random.
Yeah. Right, of course, because the underlying, the
The
physics, when
principle
you
is the
go deep
same.
down,
Principle is the
yeah,
same.
when you go deep down, it will, you'll come down to the quantum world where it's random. So this could be one explanation. And that entity doesn't need to be all knowledgeable. It just need to be truly random, something something which can generate true randomness. So it doesn't need to be anything more than that. And therefore, if you would like to call it a god, something, a true random number generator, if you want to call it god, fine, go ahead with it. But I wouldn't, give it that much,
Yeah.
bring it to
Of
that
course not.
level, right?
Yeah.
No,
So
Yeah.
you won't worship a quantum
I,
random
yeah,
generator
quantum
as a
random
god,
number
right?
generator.
Wouldn't just pray to it
Number
like 5
generator.
times a day,
Yeah,
doing. Right, right, right.
right, right.
Excellent point,
Yeah,
Kelly. Let me take Cosmic's
yeah.
comments,
And
right?
then I'd like
This
to
was,
add one more point here, but
yeah, yeah.
I have a
because
point as well. I have a point. I think we're gonna get stuck on this now.
I
But go
think
ahead.
we need to
we'll
move
have
on.
to.
Basically, I think because, yeah.
I think
Uh,
Hijab's statement is almost ended, because now he's going to present a positive case for Islam,
Yeah.
which of course
right.
we're going to dive into. But I think the primary discussion about the argument against atheism that he's raised, he's
Yeah,
already
the
raised it.
philosophical
So we'll
arguments
have
we
to.
probably have
Yeah,
exhausted, right?
yeah,
He didn't have much of a philosophical argument, to be quite
yeah. We had
honest.
to clarify. We had to steel man him. We
Yeah,
had to
we had to
present his
steel man
argument
him.
in a
Yeah,
more clear manner, in the most strongest form we could.
Yeah.
right, right,
I think
right.
I think we did a good job in that. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
We have done
Kudos
a
to
fair
you.
job.
Mani. Yeah, yeah. Cosmic Inquirer's comment. Let me read this. Right. Excuse me. This may be a bit harsh, but the Muslim audience of these debates don't tend to weigh the merits of the arguments and instead look at things like body language, outbursts, or small mishaps. Right. And the other, and Hijab sees this demand and fully appeals to it. He's an insecure person who desperately wants to portray himself as the MMA equivalent of Khabib in the
Yeah.
that that's a little too harsh, Cosmic. Sorry, that's a little
No,
too harsh.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's
Uh,
true.
all right.
Yeah.
One more comment. I'll take it, and then Virgo Cluster's comment is here. I find it ironic that Emmett's proclivity to race and slavery in every argument while being amnesiac about the brutal Islamic slavery. Blatant hypocrisy on astounding display or willful ignorance. Virgo cluster, I think we will deal with those subjects, but since we mostly deal with these more like closer to philosophical arguments, so we probably don't steer towards those. But maybe we'll all persuade each other. Khayali, myself, and Madin will persuade each other that we deal into those problems as well sometime or the other. I'm pretty sure we're going to deal with those issues as well, but we're going to keep it more towards like the philosophical aspects of it,
Yeah.
kind of. So
Just
yeah.
very quickly before Kylie takes the microphone again, because he just
Right.
spoke last. I want to be quick on mine because we want to move on. The other issue is that he makes the idea that infinites can't exist, infinite can't be actualized in reality, and I don't think there's any strong evidence for that. If anybody wants to watch his debate with Skydive Phil at the Speaker's Corner, he takes him to task with infinity, asking Hijab to explain why infinites can't exist, and he doesn't really do a very good job of it. There's nothing within philosophy or mathematics that says that there can't be infinities are logically impossible or metaphysically impossible, right? There's only a few people who say that, and that's just an opinion. It's not like a major consensus saying that infinites cannot exist, and whether or not infinites can be transposed to the real world. Many physicists do think there are models out there that the universe is infinitely large, infinites basically can materialize in the world. So this is a live issue. It's not something that can be dismissed. So the idea that an infinite being infinitely conscious being can be the only type of infinite being that can give rise to a finite universe. Well, we can question that last part in the first place. Is the universe finite, right? And we can't really get to the conclusion that because infinities can't exist, that it has to be finite. This is a big topic in itself. We can devote an entire topic on infinities, right? But Hilbert, just very quickly, Hilbert's hotel examples, for example, they are probably not applicable to the universe. Reason being, the problems of Hilbert when you manipulate the rooms and so on, and therefore you end up with more, new guests coming in, yet there's all the rooms of the hotel are occupied, so you end up in contradictions. It's not applicable on a universe because you can't manipulate the universe in that sense. And many philosophers have made the argument that the issue with infinity there is not the problem with infinite sets, but the problem with manipulating infinite sets. In other words, problem manipulating, moving around infinite, subtracting or removing, deleting, dividing infinites. But if like temporal events of the universe cannot be divided, cannot be removed, yet you can't like take a guest, just like you take a guest out of an infinite room, you can't, or take the room out. You can't take a section of time out, right? You can't take a section of, it's not that, possible. And in that sense, therefore, many philosophers argue that Hilbert's hotel illustrate that manipulating an infinity is contradictory or problematic, intuitively at least. Whereas that doesn't apply to the universe because you can't do that with the universe. So it might not be applicable on a universe level. And moreover, there's other things you can do. I mean, you have transfinite arithmetics, and which completely eliminates the usage of stuff like plus, minus, divide. You can't do minus. You can't subtract from an infinity, right? Well, they kind of develop a different sort of mode to talk about these things, yeah. But my take on it anyway is that I don't see any logical contradiction with removing 3 from an infinite series, let's say 3 items from an infinite series of apples, let's say, and you still have infinite apples left, and now you've got 3 in your hand. Now you might think that's weird. Yeah, if you apply normal standard mathematics, then by remove, by delete, by subtract, what you mean is you're actually taking away. But if an infinite didn't behave like that, an infinite behaved differently. For example, if you take 3 apples, you're not really taking the 3 apples. You're just making like a duplication of it, right? And now you've got 3 apples in your hand, and you've still got an infinite set. Then there's no problem. So it depends how you look at it. Yeah, it could very well be that you can't remove, and therefore the conclusion might be that you can't manipulate an infinity. You can't subtract from it. You can't add to it. Let's say that's the case. That's not the overall position for everybody. I'm just making that argument, by the way. Let's say you can't do that. Now there's no issue. Now there's just an infinite set of apples. What's the problem? Well, Hijab will try to say if you try to take away one, then the issue starts. I agree. If you can take away one, then what if you can't take away one? There's no issue anymore, right? And the same thing might be the case with the universe. You can't deduct, can't add, can't subtract, can't divide an infinite set of universes. And if that's the case, if they're kind of glued together or something, there's no issue. You see that? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Khayali, please go ahead.
And yeah, and in fact, since you have started that discussion, I would like to come back to the contingency argument, but since you have started this discussion, let me just point out that if you have seen the cross section, the cross questioning section of this debate, you will see that Aaron Fasser actually raised a very good question to Mohammed Hijab about this very problem that Mohammed Hijab was trying to raise about infinite not being not being possible. And Aaron raised a very good point, and I think we should discuss it right now. He said that God, according to your conception, is omniscient, meaning he has infinite knowledge, meaning he has infinite set of information, right? So
This is a very old argument.
Yeah,
it's a very old
argument. So if God comprises of an infinite set of information, because information has to be discrete, right? Because let's say he has a conception of, and he doesn't have a conception of things which actually he brings into he actually actualizes only. Rather, he also have the conception or the ideas of things and concepts which are just ideas and concepts in his mind, which he did not actually create. So he has an infinite set of ideas and concepts within him. Now, how would you resolve the problem of, and these ideas do exist. So the point to note over here is, it is not necessary that those ideas do actualize. That is not the point. The point is those ideas do exist, or those concepts do exist in the mind of God. And those ideas and concepts are in fact infinite according to your belief. How do you not apply your very logic to disprove God's omniscience?
Right. So basically, the point being, you're saying that infinity is in fact possible. Basically, when it can
Right, you do believe,
exist in God's
according to
mind,
your,
then why not in physical reality? Basically, is the
They may
logical.
say stuff like God doesn't simultaneously think about each of those propositions, right? God is not simultaneous. It's like a potential infinite. Like God can think of each and every single one proposition, or maybe like the number line, right? The number line, there's no highest number. It keeps going on. So you might make the argument then God knows every single number. But if God knows every single number, then God has knowledge of every single number. Therefore, God has knowledge of an infinite numbers. And if God has a knowledge of infinite numbers, then infinites are possible, right? Well, they may say that God doesn't think about each number at the same time or something like that, or he doesn't need to. It's like he's not thinking about all the numbers.
That's impossible.
Yeah,
because he's timeless.
Yeah, and that's another issue. That's a second issue.
He is timeless. He cannot do things in a sequence, one after the other. He has to do everything at the same timeless, timeline. I don't know how that happens.
Timeless time.
I wasn't thinking about that particular objection, but there you go. That's another problem because that's another problem.
I mean, God basically cannot think, basically, because if thinking requires time, then God cannot think.
God cannot think. No, he cannot deliberate. He cannot possibly deliberate.
No, he has to act. That's what I'm saying. He just has to act. Basically, he doesn't have.
Kylie's point actually strengthens what I want to say. Therefore, it would be the case that God has to think about all of the knowledge, all of the numbers, or whatever you want to call it, all of the names of people, and you can get to infinite propositions just by acknowledging one proposition. So God knows my name. God knows that he knows my name. That's another proposition. God knows he knows my name. That's a third proposition. God knows he knows. And
it's infinite regress.
Yeah.
So there are infinite ways to actually disprove this.
Yes, exactly.
So
now,
what does that make God? God is infinitely confused, basically.
Yeah. So, and all of those are not knowledge statements. They're all knowledge statements. So, and if God can't think of it one by one because he's not a temporal being, he has to think of it all at the same time. Although, and if he doesn't think about all of them, then he lacks knowledge about one thing or more than one thing. Therefore, he has to think about all of them. But if he's thinking about all of them,
Right.
then he has an infinite set of knowledge in his mind, you know. And then that actual infinite is actualized. So yeah, you can
Actually,
make that one by what Kylie said, because I missed that point. I forgot that tempo. I wasn't going in that direction. I just took a detour, saying, yeah, that's actually a good point, because God has to think about it all at the same time. Yeah, then you have this issue. Then you can have
right.
actual infinites.
And the way that Mohammed Hijab actually tried to try to resolve this problem is that he said that this infinite problem only applies to things which are in
Limited.
time space, which are material, and of course, I mean, which are temporal, spatial, and material. So anything which is beyond that, that can be infinite.
That
And the problem is, I mean, in that case, I would say he has resolved the problem right away. The question that he was trying to raise, he has resolved it already. Number one, he's created a special case for himself to resolve this problem, because how come this you're considering this to be an absurdity when it comes to the material world but not the immaterial world? What's the difference that creates it, that makes it logically sound and valid when it comes to the immaterial world, which is the immaterial realm of God, but not to the material world? But I think the larger objection would be, the larger problem would be that I'll try to explain my argument. I'm not very articulate, but I'll try to put it that way. I hope that I'm able to explain. You see, if his argument is that God is the necessary being, and God is timeless, and he's not spatial or temporal, and he's
immaterial.
immaterial as well. Now, what you have to understand is that means that God exists in a reality. Of course, I wouldn't say that there's a reality outside God in that reality, but just to simplify, God's reality, the level of reality that God resides in, uh, there is no time or space or materialness, okay, or materiality or physicality. Now, whatever God creates in that first level of reality has to be also an immaterial, timeless, and spaceless itself as a whole. It has to be beyond time, space, and physicality, because otherwise, what you're saying is, let's say God created time and space. Now, when he created this time and space, was there time and space before this, or this thing that he's created? Where is that located? It cannot be located anywhere physical, because physical, or the concept of time and space resides within it, not beyond that thing that he's created. I hope I know this is a bit confusing. What I'm trying to say is that in the very first level of reality, where God resides, whatever he creates directly has to be immaterial, timeless, and spaceless in its by itself, of course, but it can have time and space within that creation, but that creation as a whole wouldn't be within time and space, because then you'll end up in an infinite regress. You'll say, okay, that universe, let's say, is in another time and space. Then you'd say, okay, so that time is, where does that time and space reside? You'd say, okay, in another. No, you'll have to stop somewhere, right? And that somewhere would be the immaterial, timeless, and spaceless reality of God, which means that in that timeless, spaceless reality, there can be an infinite number of universes within which, each of which time and space can reside. This was a very confusing argument that I was trying to give, but I hope that you're able to get it. So my point is that his argument would die right away then.
Right. Yeah,
I hope.
I think I get what you mean. Like a spaceless, timeless state, immaterial state, when it creates a space-time situation, it creates the impression that the creation process itself seem to require
some
time
time
and
or
space.
space, but
Yeah,
that cannot be the case. But that cannot be the case.
yeah.
So because
That can
so let's say,
yeah.
yeah.
Go on.
So let's say he's created a bubble,
Yeah.
and in that bubble there is time and space. But the bubble itself cannot be in time and space. It has to be timeless and spaceless as a whole. So, for example, the universe that we live in, we say that time and space actually started with the expansion of the universe, right? Before this universe, there wasn't time as per our conception right now. So we cannot say that universe started 14 billion years ago as a whole. No, the time within the universe, we can say within the universe 14 billion years have passed since the starting, but that is within the universe. If we look at the universe from the outside, we would say that the universe itself is not on any timeline, most likely, or maybe if it is, then at least at some level of reality, whatever exists, it has to not exist on a timeline, because you believe in a god which is immaterial, and at that base level of reality there is no time or space. I hope this is a very complicated argument that I'm making, but I'm very clear in it. And I just would, maybe if you get it, you can articulate in a better way.
All right. So I'm just trying to think through. You're saying if God creates a universe, the God cannot create it without time, basically, and time and space, basically. If it creates it, then the time and space is I mean, if a universe such as our universe, it exists, then it needs time and space, basically. So prior to this universe, basically, you're saying. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So prior to this universe, what is your
So
understanding?
prior to this universe, you're saying it cannot happen that God can create it without time and space. Is that what you're saying?
No. In fact, no. In fact, I'm saying the other. I'm saying the opposite. I am
Okay.
saying God, the direct creations of God need to reside in a realm which is
Which is
timeless and spaceless.
non-materialistic, more non, right?
Exactly, which is
Right.
non-material. Yes,
Right. So
because
you're saying
that real, yeah,
once you have that kind of a universe, say supposedly
yeah,
God creates a universe in which
right,
in this universe, in this bubble universe, there is no space
yes,
and time, right? Now
right.
this universe, that bubble universe, has the potentiality to create another universe which has time and space. Say supposedly this is a two-level hierarchy, right?
Okay, if it is two level hierarchy, but there is no need for it to be two levels. There
Yeah,
can
yeah. I'm
be
saying
one level hierarchy.
for
Yeah,
the simpler argumentation
yeah,
sake,
simple
it's a
argumentation. Yeah,
two-level hierarchy, but you
right,
cannot escape that first level of not being non-material,
right,
not
right.
time space,
The
bubble universe, basically.
right. So the first
Right.
universe that God creates, that universe itself cannot reside on any timeline, cannot have, cannot be occupying any space per se in itself, or and it has cannot be material or physical on as a whole, but it can, and it might probably have time, space, and physicality within it. But the universe as a whole cannot be the first creation of God, or the direct creation of God, cannot be material as a whole, because for something material to exist, it must occupy some space, right? Do you understand that?
Right, right. I mean,
Right,
your argument is. I mean, I understand what you're trying to say
yeah,
here, and
right.
the kind of problem I'm seeing here is somebody could
Hmm.
object by saying that when God creates something, He creates in time, basically. You see what I'm saying? And that time
But
could be
that's
the local time
no,
of that universe, basically. You see,
no, but that's impossible. God can, when you say God creates in time, what do you
it's a
mean by that?
simultaneous simultaneity,
Are you
basically,
saying,
right?
yeah, are you saying that God
I
first
mean,
created
William
time?
Lane Craig gives this argument, but his is slightly different, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Are you
you
saying
can
God
have
first created time then?
No, they are simultaneous, basically. That's what I'm
Exactly.
saying.
So,
They
so
are
time and space is
simultaneous.
time and space are God would create time and space simultaneously.
Within, yeah, I mean, you
Now,
can. It's a kind of yeah, it's a kind of ugly response to this, but that's how they circumvent it,
it's
pretty much, in a
it's a
sense, right?
counter. It's a response of what do you call it? It's a counter argument based on their own understanding of the universe or of
Right.
reality.
That's why I'm saying
Yeah,
it's not a very persuasive argument, but I'm saying that's out there. But
I
and
think
what I
it should be
reckon is that
persuasive for them. It should be their worldview should result in this, and therefore their argument they cannot then argue on this on the line of they cannot give this argument against the kind of argument that Hijab raised about infinite not being not being possible. I think
not
according to his
actualization,
own worldview,
right? Yeah, right,
according to his own worldview, that's not the case,
right.
because he has to agree. He has to necessarily agree. In a way, he also has to understand, because and often a lot of dawa people don't realize that the contingency argument, also not the contingency argument, rather the concept of God implies that creation as a whole, the direct creation of God, has to be eternal as well. Again, it might be a bit confusing,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
because
This was
you
one of
know
the this was
because
one
it
of
cannot
the
be in time,
objections
right?
I was gonna raise about this, basically. That,
Right.
you cannot square with infinities and then you square with
Yeah.
eternality, right? And it's not just the
Right.
eternality in the past, as well as you square with the eternality in the future as
Yeah.
well.
Let me let,
And
let me just
eternality is just a theistic term for infinity, pretty much.
kind of, yeah.
Mhm.
They're different conceptions. Let me just say something, because I haven't said something in a while regarding the last thing that Kylie said. Yeah, I think that's correct as well. What Kylie said there is correct. I've not seen a distinction. But what Hijab wants to say then? So I've made a few objections. I said the statistical or inductive argument, which is the idea that we can't exclude the possibility of other entities that can cause finite events like finite universes and also be simultaneously eternal, simply because we've not experienced it. That we need to keep experience into account, and furthermore, we've not also experienced an infinite mind create a finite event, and furthermore, the history of science shows that we're really wrong about these things. We should make these massive generalizations from from experiences that we've had here. We should be open to the possibility of different cosmic events, things that are just beyond our imagination, and that's a real possibility. That's not just like a cop out. That is demonstrated through the history of our learnings. So there's a statistical case to be made that supports my suspicion there that we should be suspicious of these types of arguments about what can happen and what can't happen. Saying that, oh, there can't be an impersonal cause that can cause a. How do you know that? That's hubris, right? That's really, really arrogant narcissism. That's the first thing. The second thing is that he might be able to say, well, when you think about it logically, it's just the case that an infinitely personal mind can create finite events and distinctions in time or something, but an impersonal cause. This is actually a quote taken from William Lane Craig. I think Craig makes a similar argument when atheists make the argument: why can't if there is a first cause, a beginningless cause, why can't that cause be a impersonal universe or a cosmic event or something? And he makes the same argument. He says, well, because the universe is finite, you need free will, a conscious being to create a finite event.
Right.
Right? He makes that. So apparently, logically, you can get that. But no, it makes zero sense. Okay, so think about it this way. Think if an eternally existing being exists since eternity, then its choice to make a universe also exists since eternity. If its choice to create a universe exists since eternity, then the universe that it creates exists since eternity. Therefore, the universe it creates must also exist since
Eternally.
eternity. Exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right? So what's going on there?
and
So why?
and there should be infinite universes as well, because that if that eternal being has a choice, uh, it just can't be just one single choice, right? That's been
Right.
there for just one time, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I mean, you should. I mean, then there's no difference between infinite universes that an atheist may posit,
Right.
multiverses basically, and then there being an eternal being. They are pretty much equivalent in a sense, in terms of the behavior we're gonna see, right?
And it is related to Mahadan, the point that you just raised. It is related to what I just said, that God being timeless implies that God cannot do things in a sequence. So he
yeah,
cannot be deliberating or thinking or deciding to do something
yeah.
and then doing it afterwards, or maybe doing something before the other. He has to do everything simultaneously. He's timeless.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
if he has done everything simultaneously, then there was never a point in time. Of course, there was never a point where God existed, but his creation didn't. His
Yeah,
creation must have always existed along with him, and hence the
yeah,
creation must also be eternal.
yeah. Exactly.
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure why there's this kind of emphasis on willpower and choice to be able to get around the problem. Obviously, we've explained now that that can't be the case. But why is this special ingredient of willpower, this thing that almost gives hijab this kind of supernatural get out card to allow him
I,
to
so
simultaneously
one
have an eternal being and then also make a finite choice at some point? How does that
right.
work? Why is this? Why should we assume that? Do we have any empirical evidence of that? No, we don't. All forms of
So
willpower.
so
No, there's,
one thing, Madin, sorry, go ahead, please.
no. Yeah, let me just quickly finish up. I mean, because willpower, willpower causes some things, but also chemical reactions cause other things. Willpower occurs in time. Chemical reactions happen within time. Willpower, the only willpower that we know, which is of our own consciousness, you know, is to some extent spatial as well. Like if our take our consciousness, for example, and I know people would say consciousness is immaterial or spaceless, but it's spatial because it exists within a space. I mean, my consciousness is not spread out everywhere in the universe, is it? Right? It's kind of limited. I've got a vision, I've got a hearing. It has a spatial element to it. So it's kind of spatial and it's temporal as well. I've been talking on this podcast or stream for 1 hour, 46 minutes, right? There's a temporality to my conscious experience. The same analogy can be made with any sort of non-personal event, like a chemical reaction. Happens in space, happens in time. So why is conscious willpower any different? And we don't have any example, empirical evidence of what we know that demonstrates a difference. So why does hijab have this kind of special kind of magic consciousness that can do this?
Right,
And
right.
yeah, right. Why
Yeah,
not? Why can't we have this kind of natural event that can also do that? A eternal natural event that at some point creates also finite.
I think there is kind of a loose analogy to be made basically here, just like the laws of our regular physics break down at quantum level basically. It's the same thing as when you talk about a universe or a world where there is no an immaterial world. Pretty much what you're talking about, the words like simultaneity or will and all those, you'll have to throw all these jargon out basically, because you
Right.
don't know what the action, or you will be pretty much clinging for words. Pretty much you won't be able to use any of the words that you use in this material space, space time world, pretty much, right? So even simultaneity also requires time, right? I mean, you can't have simultaneity without time, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the arguments I have. I mean, the action. But you, as Kelly said, I mean, if that all those things were there, if and Madan, you also said that if that desire is there, then
Yeah. If it's
the world should be,
simultaneous,
universe should be existing from infinite past, pretty
exactly.
much eternally
Yeah, so
as
you
well.
can yeah, exactly. You can if the desire was there since infinity ago, that simultaneous action to create the universe then should also existed from infinity ago, but it's not.
From the eternity past,
That-
pretty
that-
much.
you
Or
can
past,
make
or
the
all those
argument then-
words are, yeah.
Yeah, you can make the argument then if the universe has to be finite, it is finite, then God can't be the explanation because God is an eternal being. You know?
Right.
Or basically, an eternal being can't be an explanation. Or if eternal beings can be an explanation, then why does it have to be a personal eternal being versus an impersonal eternal being?
Right.
Why does willpower have this get out of jail card, allowing it to cause a finite event from eternity, right? Whereas,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
at that point it just breaks down. There's no language to differentiate it. Like, why can't a natural event? I mean, maybe a natural event can't. Maybe a natural event can't do it. But how do we know if the willpower can do it? We don't have any examples of this. It's just making something up, basically. Like, willpower can somehow circumvent something. Like, he has no secondary evidence to show that willpower can do stuff like that. It's just like a magic. He just like made something up. It's like saying that it's like saying the color red can do it. What? What? Wait, what? What do you mean? Willpower. How many examples have we seen of willpower circumventing eternity and then creating finite thing? We don't. So you just
Morning Star has something to say. Kylie, you want to say something? I'll just take up these two comments, and
Yes,
then
please.
I think
Please go ahead
we
with
should
the-
move on. Probably we are stuck here for past 1 hour, I think, right? But such is the nature of this this whole subject that I think we could all go on for another hour on this topic, I think. So, but anyways, take up this Morning Star's comment. Burden of proof and its result equals to no one can call down God equals to no God exists. All right. Allah never existed. Muhammad was just an old man that married a child. I'm not quite sure. I mean, yeah. All right. Hello, you guys are weirdos. All right. Okay. Seems like it. I think we'll be towards the end of this stream if we keep discussing on this topic for
Can I just
another
say one more thing?
half an
Can I
hour or
just say
so.
one more thing and we'll move on? Unless Kylie
Yeah.
wants to also say one more thing. Yeah, one more
I
thing.
did want to say one more thing.
this is going to be here for infinite regress of time now.
I think we are becoming gods. Basically, we are going into eternity, pretty much. Eternity
Yeah.
past.
He made the objection that the problems of infinity doesn't apply to God, right? Or an immaterial being. Again, he just made something up there, right? And that's the
Yes.
thing. We should not give
He
him.
made up his own rules.
Yeah, he can't make these rules up. He needs to explain why. Because how does that work? Explain the mechanism. You can't just say words. At this moment, he's just saying words. It's like if a red thing came, then a green thing will occur. What? Wait, what? How does that work? Red thing comes and a green thing. What do you mean? Right? That's not an explanation. That's just throwing words into the air. So immaterial. Why? Because if he thinks, for example, an infinite can't exist, an actual infinite can't exist, and actual infinite numbers or actual infinite knowledge states, then clearly God will have a knowledge state, whether that's material or immaterial. And that knowledge state, we'll have to get him to concede like this. Does God have infinite knowledge about an infinity of things? You'll have to say yes. Well, that is an actual infinity. The material that is made out of doesn't affect that. Right? There's nothing in the definition of actual infinity that it makes it physical. It's just an actual infinity. An actual infinity is one where there is an actual infinite set. It's what can I say? It's not something solid or physical. It doesn't presuppose that.
Something tangible. You meant to say?
Nobody said it has to be tangible. So where is he getting this from? That if it was God, but if we do say that, then there's here's the thing in physics. There's lots of things that are probably immaterial. That a lot of physicists think are immaterial, like electrons. Some, and this is a working. I think our friend, one of our friend, Philo Abdul, for example.
Right. We need to bring him in someday.
And he'll be happy that I named him. He's completely open with everything. He makes there's plenty of things that are non-spatial.
Yeah,
maybe
I think Kylie's wondering, so maybe tell him a little bit who's.
Yeah, Abdul is basically he's doing a PhD in physics or physics and
Cosmology,
cosmology.
to be precise, right? Cosmology, I think, right?
Wow.
Yeah, he's one of our friends. We've known him in the past 10 years. Known him since he was in college.
Right,
Um,
right.
well,
I
10
think I
years
remember
ago,
I
yeah,
once made a presentation for him on Islamic morality or slavery or something like that. That was in 2013 or something, I think. A
right.
long, long way back.
You made a presentation for him
I
to
made a
present or to
presentation for
present to
him.
him?
Did he pay you?
And he won that debate as well, by the way.
All
So
right.
yeah, I'm
Okay.
patting my back.
Okay, that's good. But yeah, he names loads of things that are potentially, sorry, not infinite, sorry, but immaterial, spaceless, timeless, maybe even timeless, or spaceless. So if it is the case that these things can exist, it's very plausible that there can be unknown immaterial objects. And again, that we can use the problem of insufficient knowledge base, the fact that we've seen a limited scope of the universe. We can't make a broad inductive generalization that there can't be any immaterial entities um, that are natural, that are not non-mental. For example, like William Lane Craig says, that's the only
Madan, your voice is gone. Or
No,
it's just me.
no, I cannot hear Martin.
Madan, we can't hear you. Madan, can you hear us? We just can't hear you. All right, Callie, you wanna go ahead with what you were thinking?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add another point. Um,
Sure, go ahead.
So, I mean, another point that I wanted to so it's sort of a counter argument, and that is that if using hijab's very logic and using the contingency argument and the will argument that he's making, I would say that the PSR also applies to the Islamic concept of God, and not only is the Islamic, but rather the, I would say, uh,
Broader theistic, yeah.
the theistic, most of the theistic concepts of God.
Right, right.
And so, and why would that be? Because the PSR implies that anything having a specific attribute needs an explanation. So, if anything could be any other way, it requires an explanation outside of it.
Right,
Now,
definitely.
and that makes that very thing contingent or dependent. So, if that is the case, then the theistic or the common theistic conception of God includes God being good and not being evil most of the time, right? Most of the religions pose a concept of God who is not evil, rather he's merciful, he's all good, he's not malicious, he's not evil, which means that he has a specific attribute which could have been another way, that i.e. he could have been an evil god, but he is not. Now, what that means is the God that you believe in is at least he is not the necessary being, because he is a specific attribute which would require an explanation outside of it. Uh, I know there are ways that they try to resolve this, but it doesn't work. For example, they might say, no, it is in the very nature of God to be good. Well, where did that God's nature came from? What is the explanation of God's nature? Did God put it himself? Well, if he did it himself, then why did he do it? Was it only for an arbitrary reason or just arbitrary? Or was there a reason behind it, which again was it his innate goodness? And then it's a circle. So if your conception of God includes God being good, which is the Islamic concept of God, then your God is a dependent entity, because he is something, he has a specific attribute which could have been another way.
Yeah. I mean, somebody could argue that these are all. Yeah, I mean, yes, I see the point you're raising here. But I mean, somebody could say it's a It's the same argument when somebody says no, the good as a quality has to be within the God, basically. But then what they are doing is they are imposing their own attributes, goodness attributes, to the God that they think exists, basically. So
right?
I think I agree with your point here.
I mean, they have to, if they are claiming that anything with a specific attribute is dependent and God is good, then they have to, then they cannot just plead like, no, God has to be. Well, why does he have to be? Well, then I can say that the universe has to be this way. If
Right.
if it is up to them to choose what God can be, or if their God can have a specific attribute of their own choice, or of their own choosing, then we can have a universe of our own choosing as well. And you cannot claim and know what is the explanation behind it. I would say no, it is in the very nature of the universe to be that way. Well, then, I mean, what kind of argument would you present then? The point is, if we give them the contingency argument, if we agree with the contingency argument, then we can agree on an entity which is, as we said, he could be a random number generator.
Could
We are
be an
ready to
eternal,
agree on
yeah,
that.
eternal
Eternal
entity,
random
whatever.
number generator.
Right.
We'll arrive at that conclusion, but your argument would lead to disproving Islamic conception of God.
Right.
So it's a
Madin,
self-destructive.
Madin, are you
So
there?
I'm there
it's a
now. Can you hear me?
self-destructive.
Okay, yes, yeah. I
So
thought
it's a
you were again.
self-destructive argument.
Yeah. No, I don't know what happened before. I was still talking, but you guys couldn't hear me.
Yeah, I think
But
you didn't. You dropped out for some reason.
yeah,
Right.
but did you hear
Well, I
what I
left
was saying?
when I realized you couldn't hear me. I left and I came back, but I was still there. I didn't drop out. I dropped out
Okay.
purposely so I can refresh
Okay.
things. But based on what Kylie said, I see what he's saying, because if he says a specific thing, yeah, because the Islamic God has a very specific character as well, and that doesn't make a lot of
Right.
sense, right? So if it's
Right.
true that specific things are contingent, therefore the Islamic God is contingent. Therefore, the contingency argument can only cut to a generic God without specific attributes at best.
Exactly.
Right?
He cannot
Right.
be good or bad.
Yeah, something like that, which is hard to fathom what that means.
Right.
But because any sort of you could make the argument that if you look at good and bad like at the color spectrum, any sort of position of the color spectrum is still a specific point. Even
Right.
like a middle ground point, a mixture of good and bad is still a specific point. So,
Right.
but at the same time, at the same time, but at the same time, even making that inference to God, where is he getting the idea of omnipotence from? Where is he getting the idea of all knowledge from? I don't think the contingency argument supports those conclusions either. I know he wants to say that if it was a finite amount, therefore it'll be a contingent thing again, right?
Yes, that is what he would conclude. He would apply
Yes.
the PSR on that.
Yeah, that a finite thing. But if that's only if you agree with the very mode of thinking. I don't agree with any of that. That finite things are contingent things. I don't agree with any of this. So what is he saying? It doesn't even make a lot of sense, right? I don't see why a finite thing can't be a finite thing can't be a contingent thing. I mean, the truth of 2 + 2 = 4 is it finite? In some sense it is, right? It's not infinite by any means. That's a necessary truth, right? So it's not contingent. I've not seen anything saying that finite things must be contingent. So I have no reason to go down this line of thinking in the first place. But if we did accept that, if we do accept that a finite thing can't be necessary, therefore there has to be a necessary thing. It has to be infinite. Then maybe you do get something like all powerfulness, right? But you also can get all powerless, all completely powerless as well. So it depends how you define these things, right? You can also get, because that would be also an infinite category, arguably, right? Completely infinitely powerless. Would that be appropriate? And he might be saying a completely infinitely powerless thing can't create things or something like that. You know? Sorry,
I
go
do
on.
sometimes think that God is doomed to live eternally. He cannot kill himself.
Right. God is doomed to eternal sadness or
Yeah,
whatever,
to live.
eternal misery.
Yeah, if he's miserable, then he's a sad.
Right,
It's
right.
a sad state
Or
of affairs.
shall we guys move
Yeah,
on and then
yeah. I
Yeah,
take
think
up
let's move on.
if Saeed Bhai wants to join for a few minutes, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes, and wants to talk or ask us anything, he's welcome to do so. But in the meanwhile, we'll finish this video. He's making some arguments,
yeah.
cases for
I
Islam
would,
as well, I think.
I would welcome Saeed to talk about the contingency argument and quantum mechanics and all the
You
metaphysics.
wouldn't, or you would?
You would or you wouldn't?
I want to hear what he has to say about
Okay.
contingency.
साइद भाई
Uh,
आपके लिए महाजन की तरफ
Reason.
से
let's.
इनविटेशन आया है.
Yeah, his opinion on the
Yeah.
principle of sufficient reason and infinite regresses, transfinite mathematics.
साइद भाई आपके लिए
Let's
आपके
have a
लिए
separate
इनविटेशन.
stream. Let's have a separate stream for that.
राइट आपके लिए इनविटेशन है. आप इस पे कंटिंजेंसी आर्गुमेंट पे बात करोगे क्या? ऑलराइट, मूविंग ऑन.
We are logicians here. The Quran says if this was from Allah and God, it would have been many contradictions inside it. لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. The Quran, this is one of the necessary conditions. It's one of the only books to even posit this challenge, religious books, which is find the contradiction within it. Secondly, it's inimitable. Thirdly, it's preserved. We will argue all these points. However, what's the sufficient condition? I give you one argument and one argument only, which is the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I am claiming here, and I'm willing to be challenged today, that the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are the most accurate and numerous and frequent that come from an integrous source and unambiguous in human history. These five criterion that I've just mentioned, if you apply them to any other historical figure, it will collapse. For example, if you look at the Bible, Mark chapter number 13, you'll find that it says in one generation the heavens and earth will be destroyed. Nostradamus made a prediction that in 177 years there'll be famine and war and so on. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made the following predictions. For example, I'll give you some. That the barefooted Arabs يَتَطَاوَرُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ, that they will compete to see who creates the highest buildings. Now, we're seeing that the highest building in the world is in Burj Khalifa. How could the economic capabilities of these nations be such that if someone wanted to argue this was a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it was such?
You know,
All right.
we're just
All
moving
right.
into something different now. You know, trying to substantiate the Islamic claim, isn't he? Before we kind of go into that, he did mention something about why God has to be one. Remember, and explain it has to be a monotheism.
Right,
rather than
not a triune God or Trinity God or
yeah. And he gave some
It
reasons.
once again,
Yeah,
yeah,
go on.
it once again relates to that limited or the limitation argument, because he said that if it is limited in any way or is differentiated in any way, then it is not dependent. I mean, it's not necessary.
it's dependent.
It's dependent.
Then. It is dependent then. Right.
Yeah,
That was his
I don't
argument.
follow any of that. I don't agree with that. That if something is differentiated, then it's not dependent. Then it's dependent. And if it's not differentiated, then it can be, at least in principle, necessary. I don't agree with any of this.
I think another problem is with the power question that he poses, that you can't have two with the same power and they're going to clash with each other. I think I mean both the limited and the power problem is kind of non-problem basically. I mean you can
Yeah,
argue.
I mean, if you have let's just suspend on thinking about the differentiation problem for a minute and just move it away from the contingency argument. Then we can talk about it within the context of the contingency argument. But there's no issue with polytheism in the sense that if you have multiple deities, first of all, there's no issue with having equal harmony with one another, where you
equal status gods, right?
All deities are in consensus with one another. There's no conflict, no tribulation, no disagreement. So there's no need for destroying one another or having a conflict anywhere. So you can have, and one of the objections that Hamza has made in the past, when not personally to me, but in order to counter that, he made the argument. But then it's just as good as being one God. If all the gods are doing exactly identical things, then that's just one God. Well, no, it's not. Just because you have a corporation, let's say, and you have lots of members of the corporation doing the same thing, it's logically possible to have individual humans, right, with the same agenda, same goals, same aspirations, and they don't come into conflict. But still,
Exactly. Yeah.
three independent beings or 10 independent beings. Obviously,
Right.
that's
And
it's a weird
especially
reality.
Madin,
Yeah.
especially Madin, when you add the infinite viceness to each one of them, right? I mean, you can have those certain attributes that you can up and down, and you can get, as you said, perfect harmony between those, right? I
Yeah,
mean, an argument can be had for that. Sorry, go ahead.
you can have a perfect harmony and
Yes.
agreement and consensus, and that solves that issue. But even if you had disagreement and conflict, and why is that inconsistent with this particular universe? Now, Hijab made the argument that the universe is really orderly and structured and well organized or something. That's too optimistic. Yes, it is orderly and structured, but why can't you have an orderly, structured universe that was created by a corporation? What is he talking about? That doesn't make any sense, right? We have lots of well-ordered, structured things in the world. The internet is a well-ordered, structured thing. Skyscrapers are well-ordered, structured. Each one that is anything that in the world that we call well-ordered, any application of the word well-ordered and structured in the world doesn't involve just one person making it. So there's no inconsistency between these things, right? From experience, we know there was multiple agents. In fact, the more well-ordered and well-structured, there's more agents behind the works, right? You have many departments, many divisions, many factions, interdisciplinary skills and talents, and so on. So there's no contradiction between having order and structure and smoothness and having multiple agents. But that's too optimistic of a picture. Yes, there is order and smoothness and so on, but there's also disorder, and there's a lot of destruction, and there's a lot of chaos, and there's a lot of failed structures like disabilities in human beings, like lots of waste. You could say lots of disharmony in certain particular places. DNA gets corrupted, mutations occur, etc. I don't want to go through an endless list of every single thing like that, right? That's actually more consistent. The kind of myriad of ways the world is, which is beautiful in some ways, horrendous in others, suffering in some places, silence in others, in terms of their prayers are not being answered, in terms of fractured religions and deformities happening here and there, different caste systems and groups forming and so on. This is consistent with a multiplicity of deities, more consistent with the multiplicity of deities than a singular deity. So what is he talking about? The order of the universe, right? The universe is orderly and disorderly in many ways. And that's, first of all, if it was completely orderly, it'll still be consistent with multiple agents. So he's still not eradicated the possibility of multiple agents. But we live in a universe that is a combination of order and disorder, suffering and non-suffering. There's multiple religious messages, multiple different viewpoints in different areas of the world. There's fighting, there's wars, there's hazards, there's weather problems, there's earthquakes and tsunamis, there's etc. etc. That is more consistent with multiple deities, if anything. And then you may say, but if these multiple deities are fighting, then they must have imperfect abilities. I mean, multiple perfect, benevolent deities won't fight. And that might be consistent. You can have multiple perfect, benevolent deities in cooperation, which was my first point. But if you have multiple imperfect, in order to have multiple deities fighting, they have to be somewhat imperfect, malevolent, or something like that. And you can't really have that. There's another way to do it. You can think that each deity themselves are limited, but together as a whole, they're unlimited. And that way you can have this kind of necessary truth about it all. You know what I mean? That even each deity themselves are limited and therefore fight with one another, but all together amongst their fighting and disagreement, they come to make the universe, and they're infinite. Can you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, right. Each deity themselves has limitations and so on, but altogether they together, and
they complement each other.
They complement each other.
They complement each other.
Yeah, and the only way they can do that, if there's an infinite set of these deities or something like that. That's another way to do it. Now, we might be thinking of grandiose situations, eccentric situations, but it's a logical possibility. That's all we care about. That's what hijab.
Yeah, your proposition is logically consistent, pretty much,
Yeah,
in
that's
that
all we
sense,
care.
right?
But if
Yeah,
there's
and all
multiple infinite deities, but each one of them are finite, but together they complement each other and add up to an infinite. That could be
right,
one whole entire necessary truth, whilst they're all individual.
right.
Now, I'm ignoring the problems with the contingency argument, what he said, whenever there's differentiation. That's because I don't even find that appealing. But yeah, that's another way to do it. So I don't see an issue with having multiple deities.
and
Well, sorry.
And I think another way of, another possibility would be that, for example, let's say there are a lot of, let's say there are 1,000 deities, all of them are fighting all of the time, and therefore any universe that one creates, the other one sort of destroys it or whatever. So let's say in 9,009,999, or let's say 99.99% of the decisions or creations that these deities end up creating, end up destroying, the other deity ends up destroying it. But let's say the remaining 0.1%, where from, because if they deliberate over infinite number of decisions, let's say there are only few or 0.00001% of the decision over which they don't have a disagreement, and that is the pocket where we
Those
reside.
universes survive. You mean to say,
Yeah,
right?
those are
Those
the only
universes
universes that survive,
right,
over
right,
which there is no disagreement. And rest of the time, for over all of the rest of the universes, let's say they are indeed disagreeing upon. And
right. I
but
mean,
this is the
there
only
are
pocket where they all indeed agree on. So
see
this is
there are
also possible.
infinite such scenarios possible. You can have
Right,
any number of deities with any number of uh, if they have infinite uh, capability to think and create, basically, then you'll have such infinite such possibilities to create a new universe like
right,
ours, pretty much.
right,
Right, and then who knows what lays beyond that? It could be 1,000 deities, it could be million, it could be one Google or whatever. That's true, or
right.
it could be one as well. Who knows,
So
right?
Yeah,
so
the other
they
thing
would be they,
sorry, go on. Kylie, go
so
on.
yeah, so they would be like light interacting, light waves interacting with each other. So wherever they complement each other, the light would still pass through, even with more intensity. And whenever they interact with each other in a they interrupt each other. So we understand, right? Light could interact with each other in two ways. It could cancel each other out, or it could even intensify it. So
Right,
our pocket of the universe would be
troughs
the
and
one.
crests, basically,
Yeah.
right?
So our pocket of universe would be where their frequencies did, sort of interact in a complementary way.
Hmm.
I think we have gone far beyond the reach of any of our audience, pretty much, right at this
No,
point.
no. Can you publish one person's comment here? It's called Man City.
Yeah, I think
He mentioned it
Philo
before.
did. Yeah, Philo did
I
mention it.
did put it. I did put
Oh,
it, and he's a prophet. He's a prophet of Allah.
oh,
3 minutes back, what we were gonna do.
Yeah,
All right. Anyways, so I just wanted to bring this whole conversation to a little bit of more saner waters, basically shallower waters. Okay. And why I'm saying that, now this hijab is making a case for Islam. I just want to highlight a few problems within that, because uh, past 1.5 hours conversation, I think very hardly, or probably past 2 hours conversation, not many people are gonna listen to that conversation. I think. I mean, that's. I apologize, but that's the nature of our conversation, because we dove so deep into the deeper waters that probably nobody's gonna dare to even just put their 1 foot over there.
I think there's only one person who might be able to, and that is Saeed Bhai. We welcome
Said,
you.
Said bhai, if you're listening, please join. Madan wants to talk to you. Sorry. Madin wants to have some deeper conversations with you.
I want to talk about the contingency argument. You know?
Right, right. सईद भाई ओके सॉरी हाँ बुरा मत मानना कि हम मजाक उड़ा रहे हैं वी सीरियसली वांट यू टू कम मे बी टॉक अबाउट समथिंग वट एवर यू हैव इन माइंड बट नॉट टू फॉर टू लॉन्ग ज़्यादा देर के लिए बात नहीं कर पाएंगे 5 मिनट के लिए अगर आप चाहें तो आ जाएं कुछ भी बात रख दें अगर आपको ऐसा लग रहा है हम ऐसे ही आज थोड़े लाइटर मूड में हमारी कॉन्वर्सेशन चल रही है लाइटर मूड में हमने हैवी कॉन्वर्सेशन कर ली है आज इसलिए पर अगर आप सुन रहे हैं और आना चाहते हैं प्लीज़ ज्वाइन है ना all right, guys, just moving forward a little bit, right? Kylie, you wanted to say something? Or shall we
I
move?
think let's move on.
It couldn't be. Number two, that the Prophet ﷺ predicted the downfall of the Persian and the Roman Empire, the two greatest empires of that time.
All right, Kylie just would address these problems or these points that he's making for his case. I mean, at this point, I think what Hijab has done is he has thought within himself that now that I have proven the existence of God using contingency argument, now let me move on to my version of God, basically, right? And that's what he's doing. He's presenting a case for Islam being the true religion, or Allah being the God of the real God, basically, right? So what he has done is he has presented the best case is preservation of Quran. He mentioned preservation of Quran, and then he also mentioned that prophecies, right? So there are quite a few problems I just want to quickly mention, because I don't think we're gonna linger on these topics for too long. So what are some of the problems with these arguments? Preservation of the Quran is a very huge argument that's made by almost every top level, even top level to bottom level Islamic apologists, and that's a really, really big problem, because how do you say that a certain book has been preserved? And I mean, there are a lot of other problems. First, how do you say that a book is from some divine being, whatever that divine being he proved, basically, right? He proved there is a necessary existence, right? I mean, that necessary existence could be William Paley's God. I don't know if I'm quoting that correct. Madin, correct me. Was there a William Paley's God?
I'm not sure.
The God who threw the clockmaker's argument, right? Watchmaker, sorry, my bad. Watchmaker's argument. And it's like that, right? God made the universe and he just left it deserted, right? Now the universe is the clock is clicking, right? Or the watch is clicking, basically, right?
Before you go to that, I don't know how Hijab made the conclusion that this God cares about humanity and how this God is good, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm pointing, that he hasn't made that connection, right? I mean, that's what I'm saying, that it could be like many of the millions or zillions, trillions gods, basically, right?
I know he said,
How did you pick that one?
I know he said that a necessary being. Did he say a necessary being has to be a good being?
No, none of those arguments were made, basically. Yes, none of those arguments were made.
Because the universe, the universe equally supports an evil being. In fact, someone might argue is more likely to be an evil, or at least ambiguous, if there is a God. And that's entirely perfectly compatible with a necessary being.
Right.
You can be infinitely evil, or you can be, and therefore Stephen Law's evil God hypothesis is compatible with necessary being, and it can also be that the Islamic God is deceptive. So he needs to show. I don't see how any of these arguments, like revelations.
No, what I wanted to do, Mahadan, was not get into those things, because that's gonna then make. Just wanted to say, let's assume that we somehow come to where he wants us to go, and address the problems that are there in his presentation from that point on, basically, right? I mean, there are so many gaps from that whatever single omnipotent, omniscient
the reason
being.
I'm saying this, though, Philo, the reason I'm saying, though, this is how you can win these debates, because the debate is versus Islam or atheism. In order to prove Islam, you have to show there's a benevolent, merciful deity who wrote the Quran. Even if everything Hijab has said is right so far, if even if he proves the linguistic argument, even if he proves Islam foreshadowed things like in the 7th century that Arabs will build tall buildings and look, there's skyscrapers in Dubai, or something like that. Even if he does all that,
Right.
does
That's one of his prophecy, right?
does he prove what he needs to prove in his proposition, that there's a merciful, benevolent deity of the Quran? No, he doesn't, because
But
yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I,
on.
I I agree to your point. I mean, your point is perfectly valid. No questions about it. Kelly, you wanted to say something,
no,
please.
but
Because
I mean, Mahajan,
debate. This is
yes,
like debate
Mahajan.
ethics, right? I think the atheist, if he made that the burden that hijab has to show, and then emphasized that he still didn't show this, he would have won the debate easily. And that's why it should be actually far easier to defeat theists than we think, right? If they can't prove everything in their proposition, they've lost the debate. You know,
Yeah,
now,
Madhan,
yeah,
sorry. You know why the intention for me to do this over here is because a lot of those guys who are going to watch it are Muslim brothers, or even whoever watches it. They won't be able to understand that connection that we are making from there to this. I just want to at least let them understand the kind of arguments he's
okay,
making is still fallacious basically from this point on, right? I mean, you and I both agree on that point. How did he reach to a good god being all those with all those attributes?
yeah.
So totally with you on that. But just because those guys who are going to listen to it, they're probably going to be asking, hey, what happens to this argument of
Yeah, yeah.
hijab? Because
No, I was
that's
going to
what
address
is
that as
most of the
well.
Muslim crowd
I
is
was,
going to listen to, right?
yeah, I was going to address that as well. I wasn't saying in the exclusion of that. I'm just trying to emphasize that even if you do get those right, it still doesn't prove their side of the case. It doesn't mean atheism is correct, because obviously the atheists have a burden as well. So it just because the hijab doesn't prove his case doesn't mean the atheists are correct, but it means that he doesn't get it right either. Um,
Right, right,
yeah,
agreed.
Well,
Kelly, go
but
ahead.
yeah, I mean, what I would say is that so I sort of use the contingency argument to prove that God cannot be good. So let's set this aside for a moment. But what if he's trying to say that, okay, so first of all, in fact, the first part that he, logically speaking, what if he goes like this? He says that I don't even have to use a contingency argument, or I don't have to even have to prove God philosophically. I just have to give you this argument, let's say the argument from Prophecies. And he claims that if there are numerous specific prophecies by a person, and he claims to be from God, and all of those turn out to be true, would you agree logically that this is not something that is possible for a human to achieve, and therefore this must be from a deity or the divine?
Some god at least, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think,
Yeah,
Mahajan?
yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, more number of. I'm totally with you on that. Basically,
Right.
nobody's gonna. I mean, not too many people are gonna care about contingency argument, but they're gonna care a lot about this argument from prophecies and all those, because they're in there. And I'm not disrespecting anybody here, but they probably haven't come across these kind of arguments. All the kind of arguments they have come across is prophecies, and then those taller Dubai buildings and all those things, right? The splitting of the moon, and then the
Right.
yada yada yada, right? So this is what they're gonna listen, and then you have to at least tell them that this is still fallacious, right? And so I agree with you, Kelly. I mean,
And no, I mean, my point is that logically speaking, let's say if a person comes to me and he says, I'm not going to present you any philosophical argument, but I'm going to present you a religion, or a person who claims to be from God. He has 200 prophecies which are specific, and all of them
no,
are going
for
to come true, and he somehow proves that
yeah, I
those
see your
indeed
point,
come to be true. And
right?
he also proves that his conception of God is logical. Then
No,
I
but
would say,
that's
well, I don't need.
sorry.
Then
Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
mean, I don't. Then I would say that I don't need to go to the contingency argument, or I don't need any separate proof. Then what do you think? Do you
No,
agree
but
with that?
that's someone who's soundly philosophically oriented probably might not fall for those kind of proofs of God, right?
Okay, why not? Do you think
That's what I'm
don't you
thinking,
think
at least. Huh?
don't you think prophecy is a good argument
I don't think
for
prophecy
God?
is a good argument. It could become true by virtue of some natural factor as well. I mean, it could be.
No, no, but
It doesn't
numerous
imply a God, right? A thinking. It doesn't imply
numerous
a thinking mind, right?
what about numerous prophecies? Let's say 400
It could be. It could be
prophecies
a
which are
thousand
specific.
billion.
Yeah, I mean,
It,
you would still wouldn't agree that this is something. I mean, I'm just speaking about, I mean, me personally. If somebody gives me a proof that okay, this person made 500 prophecies, those which were specific, without any mental gymnastics, those prophecies did indeed come out to be true, and the the conceptions of God and the concepts, the theology of that religion, whatever he's presenting, is logical. It just needs to be logical. He doesn't have to
no,
prove it that that is indeed the case. It just needs
no.
to be
All I'll
logically
say,
consistent.
all I can
I would say
deduce
that
from
this
this.
is that would be enough for me. I would say I
No,
would then believe it.
it won't be enough for me. All I can deduce from that is this guy is especially gifted, and he's
Yeah.
getting some information that I can't fathom. But
Mhm,
he knows future. Maybe he can time travel. Maybe he has made a machine that he can do a time travel,
mhm.
right?
Okay, so you're saying
And
that
that's all I can't.
prophecy.
He's probably hiding that time travel machine from everybody, and nobody in the
Mhm,
world can replicate that machine. It's what I would think, basically. But I won't give in to his then demands that okay, this is coming to me from a god. I would need a completely different set of proof for that, at least from
okay.
me. I don't know for Mahadin what it would
No, the thing is, I don't think we should get to choose what threshold of evidence is required in order to substantiate a proposition. My philosophy of knowledge and epistemology isn't like that. We're not just talking about um, we're not just talking about pragmatic reasons or pragmatic reasons to do things. We're talking about epistemic reasons, right? At the beginning of the debate, as the atheist made, that you can make a pragmatic case that for so and so, if this occurs, then it's more beneficial to believe maybe. So you can take what Kylie said to make a pragmatic argument that if a 500 prophecies were fulfilled by a person, let's say, and he's claiming to be God, and it's logically conceptually possible that he's God, and that might be enough. You might bet on that subjectively, right?
Exactly, exactly. I would bet on that. I
Yeah,
would be
that
ready to bet on that.
yeah, but that's a pragmatic
Yeah.
case, right? That might be enough as a personal sense. But then the question is it an has an
all right.
epistemic?
So here, let me
Yeah.
pose an counter argument to that. Let's say that guy does that, and then tells you to do something that is against your intuitions. Would you
I
still
think
do that? Is the question. Then
I think we are going into the same territory that we went in. I think 2 or 3 streams back, right? Where God requires us to do something which we feel, at least we intuitively feel, is immoral, right?
I mean, at
Yeah,
what?
So
but
So no, the
you're
point I'm
believing,
trying to raise here. Point I'm trying to
believing,
raise here.
yeah.
Sorry, Adin, go ahead.
No, but just to keep in mind, Kylie, you are pragmatically thinking it's a god. You don't have epistemic reasons to think it's a god, and that's the differentiation that I was trying to make. A pragmatic reason is just one that's in your best interest. It's not about how much knowledge you've
no,
got. Yeah.
no, but I mean, let's put it off probably for another time. But let's discuss what could possibly be reasons. What could persuade you to believe in a
Mm.
god? Let's say, if it was a possibility. So yeah, I mean, we could discuss that, of course.
I've written on this in the past before. I don't think you can, with finite resources, demonstrate
You're right.
a
I
I
mean, we
yeah.
agree.
cannot be
I agree.
absolutely sure. We cannot be
Let us say
absolutely sure
hello
of
to
anything.
Pratik.
But yeah,
Let us say
yeah.
hello to Pratik
Hi,
Shah.
hi,
Yeah.
Pratik.
Hello.
Suppose there was an entity that existed since the beginning of time, creating things, right? And we've come to a finite amount of time that's surpassed. And I've been with this being creating things. I still won't think it's a god. I don't think I have epistemic reasons to think it's a god. I still
Right.
think, it could let's say it's been making things for 60 billion years. right? And it's heading towards eternity, right? Until we get to eternity, which we won't, because you can't get to a eternity. It's like they'll just keep going forward. There'll never be a point where you realize that this being is infinitely powerful.
Right. Because you'll never be able to witness him doing infinite things, because because infinite can never, you'll never be able to do, or you'll never be able to witness the infinite things.
Exactly.
So maybe he can do.
Question is, the question is, what point do you stop and just go, you know what, this is enough for me?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that as soon as you do that, then there's a question of subjective knowledge versus objective knowledge. Is it objective knowledge though? I would say no. If it's an epistemic case, epistemic means that's more to do, because my definite philosophy of knowledge is that we can't just make up the threshold required to believe something. Right. So if somebody comes along and says, if you prove something with 5% certainty, then I'll believe it. Right? That's still not a good case. Objectively speaking, it should be above 50, maybe 60, 70, right? Because then there's a high probability that it's right. So I don't see there's an objective element of probability to knowledge. This is why I don't think you can set a threshold for knowledge. That's why epistemic stuff, I don't think we have our choice to set.
Right, I agree.
What is reliable knowledge? However, pragmatically, you can do anything with pragmatically. For you, whatever you personally think is enough. Yeah, but I don't think you'll be correct if you said, "I have a God." If it's an objective statement, then even if you've been there for a finite amount of time, for 400 billion years, and he's been creating skyscrapers, one bigger than the other, it won't be enough to show he's a God. If by God is an infinitely powerful being, because that's not enough. In fact, you're an infinity away from it. And therefore, you'll never have the sort of probability you need, right? You won't be there 60% confident, 50. You've got no confidence because you don't have no idea where its limits end. And I can show you this example. For example, if little animals were able to think a little bit, they'll think we are gods, right?
Right.
Yeah, because we can build lots of stuff, and to them we look like infinite beings. Would it be enough for them to think that?
In fact,
we are gods, right?
If we could go to the past, along with some of our gadgets, the past, the humans of, let's say, a few thousand years ago, they would think we are gods.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you're right.
I think I agree with what Madin has said. How do you set the limit of your threshold of when you're gonna get convinced with something? I think isn't convincing something that's where do you set that threshold? Pretty much is the question.
Yeah, and I
with
think
that, those
like I try to resolve it by thinking that it should be above a probability of 50%. That it is good reason to believe it to some extent.
I'm not quite sure about that. Even putting those probabilities.
Yeah, maybe 70, 80%, because then you're getting into the learn of high probability, right?
Right.
Below 50. So some people say it's above 50%, but that's not enough because that's like 50-50. You've got let's say if you got 51% reason to believe one thing and 49% to believe it's false, then it's almost even. Then you should be agnostic, really technically, right? But if you've got like 70% to believe something, 30% is not true, then you have more reason. Then you might think it's likely. And if you got 80 to 90%, then it's very likely. It's 99%, then it's almost certain. Right? I think that's how it becomes objective. I don't think you get to set the threshold. If somebody comes along and if Kylie came along and said, I set it to 5%. Well, you don't have knowledge, not good justified knowledge. You just made your own standard up. That's still not knowledge, objective knowledge, right? It has to be above at least 70%, I would say, or something like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem that sorry, Kelly, you want to go, please?
No. I mean, I do agree with that. I mean, it has to be a sufficiently large number. So that's why I said 500. Of course, it's just a number that I came up right now. But I would say
exactly.
A sufficiently large number.
Right. How do you set that number? What is exactly that number
where you're
going to get from one point to the other, right?
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to say.
You see, it's like how you get convinced. It's like how you get convinced of someone that he's a trustworthy person, right? So there comes that point in where you start trusting that person, right? There isn't a specific threshold like, okay, so I'm going to test him these specific I'm going to test him through these specific ways, and then I'll decide. You just ultimately, based on some past experience, you decide ultimately to trust some person. So I think it would be something like that.
But
Right.
But of course,
that is not, he's not infinitely trustworthy. That's the issue.
no,
Right.
of course,
Right?
yeah, he's not.
Right.
That's what creates the problem. If it's just trustworthy,
Right.
technically we don't just trust them. We do this, right? Every single instance where I've trusted this person, most of the time he's been trustworthy, then it's highly likely that he's going to be trustworthy the next time.
Right.
That's
Right.
okay, yeah? Right? And
Right.
if somebody's been trustworthy maybe 70% of the time and 30% of the time not, we don't just deludedly believe him every time, you know? We kind of assess his commitment to whatever
Yeah,
he's saying.
we don't.
Yeah, we kind of check things, we act cautiously. It's a provisional stance. We update it. We never go, oh, he's trustworthy, let alone he's eternally, absolutely trustworthy.
Right.
Also, the
Right.
kind of trustworthiness is going to depend the kind of claims he's making, right? If he's making a claim about something very benign, you're probably going to be more trustworthy towards, I mean, he's going to seem more trustworthy to you. But if he's making some claims which are very, very exclusive claims, then your trust has to go down for sure, right?
Right. Of course.
I think with what Kyle is saying is that from a pragmatic case, it might make sense in this sort of intuition. If you have a being that's been, ever since the day you were born, been correct about everything he's saying, you might not still have epistemic warrant to conclude it's a deity, but pragmatically, as a cost-benefit analysis, it's better that you act like it, yeah, because even if you're wrong, he's at least very, very powerful, yeah, and he's at
Right.
least, even if he's not a god, even if he's not conclusively a god, he's consistently getting things right.
I mean, that's the same problem, Mahadin. That's the same problem you get into when you're talking about Prophet Muhammad, right? I mean, he was known as trustworthy. He performed certain miracles, right? Now, if given those accounts are true, then you should be, as you are pointing out, as a pragmatical, from a pragmatic point of view, you should then believe, right?
No.
That's
But
the thing.
that's not the only thing, right? What
Yeah.
I'm saying is that, let's say that person is not only just making simple, random statements. He's making some very specific
Yeah, I mean,
prophecies, let's say,
I agree.
and
Right.
which is, there's no way for him to know. So something which, it's not like, okay, let's say he's making a prediction about who will be the next prime minister out of the two. Well, that's 50% chance. But let's say he tells me that in the after 30 years, this specific person, who's, let's say, is a child right now, is going to become the next president, and that person is not even in a political party right now. He has no political connection. Okay, so that is one. This is just an example of one claim that he makes. And let's say there are hundreds of similar claims that he made, and all of them throughout my life continues to be true. None of them turns out to be false. Then I would be, in a way, I would be thinking, like, it seems that there is something that he has, there's some sort of connection he has, or probably he is himself quite powerful, or he is connected to someone powerful who's helping him, getting
Yeah.
this knowledge.
Let me just highlight though that is the difference between a pragmatic belief and an epistemic belief. Just to
Yes,
explain
of
what I
course.
mean.
Right.
You're
Yes.
not actually believing. You're not actually believing that Muhammad is
Right.
trustworthy or it's a god. You're just following him. You're just acting in your best interest and follow him without. The best way to describe it is, imagine if you're on your deathbed, right? And let's say you know the evidence for homeopathy is rubbish. There's 2% chance it's correct. 2%. Yeah?
Yeah.
2% chance. You believe it's false. 2% chance is a very good indication that it's false. It's not going to work. However, as a cost-benefit analysis, let's say there's no other medication that's working, and your death is certain, 99.9% or something, 100%, let's say. At that point, it's probably, even though you're so confident based on the evidence that homeopathy doesn't work, you may as well still take it, right? Because you may the cost benefit risk assessment of the situation completely justify, even if there's, let's say, a little.
I mean, there's nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose.
Try it. Yeah, there's no problem. I mean, in other situations, there might be things to lose, money. Like if you're so sure, then if somebody's selling you like a £50 bottle of homeopathy, that might still not be worth it if you're especially that sure. But in your deathbed, you got nothing to lose, do it. But in none of those situations is there a requirement that you believe it, that you believe, oh, homeopathy works now. In none of those situations, you have good justification to believe it, right? Suddenly in your deathbed, it didn't become more probable that homeopathy would work. It's just that you have nothing to lose to it. And that's what I mean by a pragmatic action or stance. What I mean is that if there's a deity or even Muhammad just getting everything correct, you still don't have no reason, you don't have good reason to believe it's a deity. Muhammad is blessed by a deity, or he's perfect, whatever. You have no grounds for that yet. But you may as well, because you have nothing to lose. You've got a track record that's working. At the very minimum, he's finitely successful more than other people. Very minimum, this deity is very, very powerful more than other people, and you may follow it. Act
No,
like
so maybe I mistook Khali's argument. I thought his argument was not as a last resort argument, kind of. It was
Yeah, I
his
would
case was
agree.
more
Yeah,
of a positive
it was.
case, basically. His case was
Yeah,
a more of a positive case.
I mean, I would
So
be more inclined. I might even become convinced. I mean,
right,
what
right.
that would mean is that I would feel like, okay, now, I mean, it makes. I might become. I might feel compelled to believe that, okay, now this seems like it, at least. So it's like a convincing argument now, and I think it would make sense to, believe
Believe him,
meaning,
right.
yeah, believe in him, and and then act based on that. And I wouldn't feel like I have no argument. I would say that, yeah, I mean, I have good reasons to believe in that. I would say
no.
that much. I
I would
wouldn't
disagree.
say
Yeah, I would
I
disagree
wouldn't
with.
say that I'm absolutely sure. I wouldn't say that I'm absolutely sure, but I would say based on what I know, and based on what I can know. Well,
So you're
you
betting
know,
your
it seems.
hedges, basically.
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just go back on the deathbed thing. I'm not saying that last resort situation is just applicable only in last resort situation. It's just to highlight that in that situation, there's a cost benefit. The benefits outweigh the risks. And in Kylie's fictitious scenario, I'm not saying he's on the deathbed. I'm saying his normal life, some guy is revealing all these things. The benefits outweighs the risks to just follow him, follow this guy and worship him, right?
Right. Right.
However,
Okay.
yeah, but I
Okay.
don't think the language that Kylie is using is correct to say that I have good reason to think it is a god. I don't think he has good, because I do think knowledge is. I don't think he has epistemic warrant, but he has pragmatic cost benefit warrant to behave in a particular way to benefit himself. He's got epistemic warrant enough to say that this being that is getting everything right is very, very powerful, but he hasn't got epistemic warrant to say that it's infinitely powerful, right? I think that's Philo's
Yes.
point as well. Philo was trying to say that he doesn't have justification to think he's infinitely powerful. He's just very, 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 very powerful. And now Kylie wants to say that that's enough for him to believe.
Right.
Um,
I think then we are on the same page, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Let's
I
finish in
think
15
Philo.
minutes. Huh?
Do you think we can finish it? Because this, what we could probably do is, hijabs. We could, now this was, I think, the most. I would say
Meaty,
that
meaty bit.
meaty bit, right?
Mhm.
Now, what we could do is, let's separate, because people who might be interested in a bit more, let's say,
Spicy,
easy,
spicy stuff.
yeah, the argumentation which is a bit more easier on our intellect.
Right.
I think they might not be able to identify, that we started that bit at around 3 hours mark. So let's, and I think it would be better if we just do a separate stream for that, and we
Sure. I
discuss
mean,
that. I mean, I
sure,
think that's my
sure.
suggestion, because we are already around 3 hours mark.
3 hour mark.
So
Madin, what do you say?
Yeah.
Shall we finish it or do this other
No,
time, some other time?
let's,
Then,
no,
huh?
no, no. Let's do this another time. I mean, yeah.
All right. All right. All right. I think nobody joined us. Anybody who wants to talk to us for 5 minutes or so, I think both of you are okay, right? Somebody comes and joins, maybe talks to us for 5 minutes. We don't have too many watching, by the way. But Pratik, if you're here, let me know in the comment section if you're still listening. Anybody who's listening, maybe just raise a hand if you want to join. please come in, and then you can talk to us, ask us any question regarding Islam, regarding Christianity, regarding polytheism, Hinduism, atheism, agnosticism, whatever you want to ask, right? We're going to wait for another 2 minutes or so if somebody comes and joins. Otherwise, we're going to close the stream. Yeah, I think we kind of covered a lot of ground, a lot of arguments, and probably we dove a little too deep into. And that's the nature of these debates. No, yeah, I mean,
I'll just quickly say,
not blaming ourselves.
yeah, I'll just quickly say, but Hijab has to also deal with the atheists' arguments. Though he's making his own positive case for Islam, revelation, and foreshadowing the future, linguistic miracle. But then he has to weigh that against all the objections that the atheist has made already, like the geographical.
All right, he does respond to that towards the end, I think. Right? Shall we fast forward to that and
No,
then
no, no,
deal
no,
with
no.
it, or maybe
No,
deal
no.
with it
Deal
later
with it
time?
later.
Not right now.
I'm just finishing
We'll not be
off.
able to deal with them. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
We'll
not
not
going to
be
be
able
able
to
Yeah,
to.
deal with them.
that's
Heavy
gonna deal
topic.
with the problem of evil, probably. Yes. So
Yes.
Yeah, because he can't just simply say that here's some glimmers of theism, the Quran. He has to look at the opposite of that, which is the non-glimmers of theism, which doesn't fit with that data. So every single data point that he's going to use, is the Quran, is the Quran inspired by God? The linguistic miracle is one example of that. But then I'm sure the atheist has his own explanation as to why the linguistic miracle is actually evidence that there is no God, and he's probably going to do it like that, and he should do it like that. So you might say on a hypothesis that if God exists, he won't create something like the linguistic miracle, and that's a combination of divine hiddenness and the problem of suffering, right? The problem of suffering and divine hiddenness, like God, why should God play hide and seek like this? He's already made this argument, and the problem of the geographical differentiation of religion, the multiple different types of religion, and the fact that you can find miracle
yeah,
claims.
doxastic discord is
Yeah.
is the
The fact that you
other
can find
problem
similar miracle claims everywhere. Everybody believes their own miracle is true. That this is evidence supporting the fact that these are all man-made. So he has to deal with all of that.
Yeah, I think Aaron made two arguments. One is argument from evil, and then I think probably three, maybe if I'm forgetting.
Yeah.
Doxastic discord is the second one, and maybe I'm forgetting the third one probably.
Yeah.
So he raised 4 points, I think, when
4
he
points.
was going through them quickly, right? So I
Mhm.
think he talked about the existence of non-resistant non-believers,
Right,
the
right,
dogmatic
right.
discord, the I think there were two more. I can't.
Do you think?
Yeah, problem of evil.
do you
The
think
problem of evil.
we have two viewers right now? Yeah. Do you think it is Oppenheimer and is it Aaron watching us now? Because if it is, that would be interesting. Imagine.
Yeah. No, they probably won't be watching us. They'll be. He said he's gonna come to our streams at some point. I don't know when. Probably they are still in the process of. So just want our at least viewers to know. Khyali and Mahadin both already know this. After their debate, I got in contact with the first speaker, Aaron Fasser, and we had a bit of conversation, and then we said we do the stream and all that, and he said they'll come, both of them, Mark and Aaron, might drop by in one of our streams, but not today. So I invited them for today's stream as well, to just go through these arguments and actually Hijab's opening statement with us, but they weren't available. So let's see if they come. Then I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have a really good conversation with them as well. So Madan, those I think we'll deal with Hijab's remaining
Yeah.
arguments or remaining opening statement later on in our next stream.
Yeah, and we should do it in the context of what the atheists have already said. So every single argument for theism has to be evaluated in that lens. So if you've got like a tall building prophecy, is this evidence of God, or is this evidence of man-made stuff? And you can make the argument that God could have given better prophecies, more clearer prophecies, prophecies that are not self-fulfilling. with better wording, and so
Yeah, I
every
think
single
most of these are cases of self-fulfilling prophecies, right? I
yeah,
mean, what was happening in past 1350 years, right? There were
yeah.
Saudi
That's
Arabia was
evidence.
the
I would say that's
poorest
evidence. Yeah,
country and all those
I would
things,
say that's
right?
evidence for naturalism or atheism rather than
That
theism.
is that indicates towards naturalism. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
So
I
I
think
I
we
think
could argue.
going forward, we should frame it like this: every single thing we talk about, is this evidence for atheism or is this evidence for theism? Hopefully, that's what the atheists in this debate did as well. I hope.
No,
If we didn't,
they didn't.
They didn't touch this part. I don't think they never discussed this part.
I think
As far as I know.
I think one thing that has to be criticized is the format of this debate, because
yeah,
nobody got a chance to respond to others'
There was no rebuttal
objections.
section.
Yeah,
There was just
there
a
was no time for
cross
rebuttals,
questioning
basically.
section. Right?
really. See, if I ever have a debate with these people or anybody, I would never have these time slots. I would not have time slots in the first place. It should be my chance to speak, however long it takes. Your chance to speak, however long it takes.
Yeah, I mean,
It
in
would
a real world, Mahadin,
it
probably
would
that's
go
not
for hours and
possible.
hours and probably days.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
yeah. In a real world, that's not possible. So, but the
But
good thing that
think about it, Philo. We do it in the real world all the time, and it doesn't last forever. That's all I'm
no,
saying. In other
I'm
words,
saying
you
I'm
see what I'm
saying
saying?
in terms of a debate, I'm saying, right? I mean, we can have these discussions for sure, but in a debate setup, that's probably not feasible, right?
No,
That's
that's
what
what I'm
I'm
saying.
saying.
We have these debates all the time. Like, let me give you an example. We're having that debate right now with somebody under one of the YouTube videos that we did, right? And there's no word limits, there's no restrictions, there's no time limits. That's what I'm saying. We have informal debates like this. That's what I'm saying. The only
Yeah,
issue is,
you're right. You're right.
yeah,
But the
in that
problem with
sense,
those is that there is no audience, right? You want to engage with the audience. That's the thing, right? I mean, you cannot have a large part of the audience
well,
uh,
that's true.
participating in a debate, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, there are issues, but I think you're right. You can have some kind of a discussion more than a debate, and then you can have like no time limit kind of a thing, and still somebody gets to completely make up their point and then do
yeah.
cross examination and all that stuff.
What
Pretty
it could be, yeah, what it could be is the you. I think if you do have a moderator, you could have the moderator enable one person to fully tackle the other person's argument, right? And when the moderator realizes that he's adding more or going off topic, then to control him. And when the moderator realizes that he's actually exhausted everything, he's talked about everything.
Okay, somebody just joined the stream. If they want
Yeah.
to come and talk to us, they're welcome. Hello, whoever just joined in
I
to
think
watch the stream.
I think Saeed came back from the library or something. He's
You,
got a book.
Madan, you're being too harsh on Said Bhai.
Return.
At least we have one regular supporter of us, right?
Yeah. But what I'm saying, I think there are more creative ways. I don't want to go through them all right now, but there's different ways you can have debates where you're not stuck in these kind of 5-minute format, 10-minute rebuttal, 5-minute, it's just boring. But these topics is just not interesting. If every single debate that I've ever watched has the same problem, then something's going wrong. Maybe we're just trying to make debates seem like movies and shows and that's not going to work. Maybe we can't cater to the vast majority of people. Maybe have both. Maybe have a short debate and a long debate, so you can cater to the intellectuals as well. Because that's how courts work, right? In a court, and I'm speaking this from experience in court. There's no time limits.
But that's why courts are inefficient, right?
Well, from a time perspective, it is. But it's efficient. No. But the
I mean,
court,
you know the state. There's no country in the world where courts are efficient. There's no single
that's true.
country.
It's the least imperfect system, you'd say. But in
Yeah.
the sense of, it's inefficient in the sense that it is humanely inefficient because it's still like the best worst system. But there are worse systems. Like if there was time bound, it'll be inefficient even more. Maybe not in terms of getting things done on time. Yeah, it won't be inefficient there. There'll be a set date, everything done, finished. But evidence would be underanalyzed. People are not going to get the proper rebuttals. Some people, things like that would happen. So the inefficiencies will get distributed elsewhere. So the thing about unending sort of court trial process, and by the way, not every jurisdiction does that. There are some jurisdictions where at least the judge would move the process along. But in many places, there is a huge liberty of time. If the prosecution needs X amount of time, do it, because people's livelihood is on the line or something like that. So or the defense needs X amount of time, do it, because not every single argument you can express in 5 minutes. It's not possible. Like, I could come out with something like an objection in 3 minutes, and it can take you 20 minutes to unravel it, right? That could just be the nature of the unraveling versus the nature of the objection. But I don't think time should stop it if you want to get to the justice of it, the truth of it. And maybe that's not going to be appealable to the vast majority of people, but if I want to get to the truth, I would prefer that. Yeah.
All right. Yes. I mean, I, in a sense, I do agree with your point, and I do understand it, but it's a practicality versus the other thing, basically, right?
Yeah.
And
Just think about
practically it is very hard to do it.
Just think about how many debates you've watched, thinking, oh, we couldn't go into that. Most things were not covered because, well, then maybe something's going wrong. Or maybe you need to have those 5-6 hour debates. Do you know how like Hashmi had with Hakikachu? That was a 6-hour debate. Maybe sometimes
Right.
you just do that for at least the crowd that are more willing to learn. Because some people can do that. Like, some people enroll into programs and study courses. They have the interest to do so. So they'll be willing to watch a 6-hour debate. Mainstream audience may not. So you can have a debate for the mainstream as well, but also have a debate for the deeper intellectuals.
But yeah. I mean, I see your point. I mean, it's again time constraint for both the debating side as well as the audience, right? I mean, I see your point, but it's in the real world how feasible it is. It's, for me, it's hard to say, right? But yeah, let's do. Kylie, you have something to add to whatever we have been talking about?
No, I mean,
You want to
I
go?
just have to,
You
in
want
fact,
to
be
go on?
somewhere. Yeah, I have to be somewhere right now.
Okay.
I have to.
Shall we close
Somebody
it
has to
then?
leave.
Close our stream.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you.
Yeah.
It's totally up to
We'll
you.
close in. I think
Yeah.
anybody wants to come and talk to us. 4 of you listening, and if you want to come and talk, say hello, hi, and that will be fine. We'll close the stream.
All right. Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, so we're going to close the stream. Before we leave, anybody who watches the stream, please like, subscribe. I keep repeating the same thing. Like, subscribe, and share. Press the notification bell so that you get the notification for the next stream. And make sure you leave a comment, whether you find something good, bad, whatever, right, in our conversation, right? The flaws you find, or then better arguments that you can find for your opposition, our opposition, right? Whatever you want to do, just write something, right? Good or bad. Criticize us to the best of your abilities, right? All right, cool, everybody. Thank you very much. And Mahaden, thank you very much. Kayali, thank you very much. And I'll see you guys then in next stream, which probably we'll do in maybe next weekend or so. All right.
All right. Bye-bye. See you later.
Okay,
All right.
guys.
Do you guys want to add something or done?
No.
No,
Bye-bye.
I think.
Done. All right. Bye-bye.